the legendary Hollywood director. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 951 Outlook for 2010. In 2010, after a break from the usual year-end cocktail party, we still had to work. In the Firefly building, in the huge conference room, everyone was present. Among them, Lyman was in charge of the film business, Ryan was in charge of the TV series department, Perelman was promoted to the regional president, in charge of the copyright development business such as audiovisual peripherals, and the rest of the administrative management was Joseph, the distribution president. Lyman, the second largest shareholder and CEO of Digital Domain. Scott, the second largest shareholder and CEO of Illumination Entertainment. Meledandri, the newly established Red Dragonfly president. Virginio, and Marvel Pictures president Kevin Feige and Marvel Entertainment general manager Joe Quaddle. Of course, the backbones of each department, including the directors who worked closely together, were all there. Zack Snyder, Nolan, James Wan, Gyro, Alfonso, Alejandro, Juan, Orphanage, and if you count Cameron, Jason Reitman, Sophia, etc. who maintained friendship. The director Linoop of Firefly was quite luxurious. At the beginning, the manager of the TV department gave a report. In 2009, we cooperated with many TV stations and broadcast a total of 7 dramas, with a total revenue of $643 million, of which advertising and payment share accounted for 45%, drama broadcasting fees accounted for 25%, copyright operation and family entertainment accounted for 30%. And net profit was $450 million. This year, due to the completion of Prison Break and the declining ratings of The Walking Dead, as well as the problem of insufficient audience freshness of other dramas, only 5 dramas are to be prepared for filming, or are already in preparation, including the 3rd season of Stranger Things, the 4th season of Breaking Bad, the 3rd season of Black Guy, the 2nd season of Hell's Kitchen, and the 1st season of Agent Carter. The number of dramas has decreased compared to last year, and revenue is expected to decline accordingly. After talking about TV dramas, it was time to report on movies. Perelman stepped forward and said, in 2009, we participated in the production, distribution and screening of a total of 8 projects. Blue Butterfly took over 2 distribution businesses, with a revenue of $2.13 billion, and the peripheral and family entertainment parts accounted for more than 70%. Which proves that channel operations are still the main source of profit for the studio. He had just sat down when Lyman said, in addition to Avatar, which is currently being screened, let me briefly talk about the projects we have to develop this year. Nolan's Inception has been completed, and is ready to cooperate with Columbia, to be released in the summer. The Saw series directed by James Wan has been filmed to the 7th film, and there is also the second 300 by Zack Snyder, The Tuna, which I'm going to direct myself, Gone Girl co-produced with David Fincher, and Iron Man 2, which has been scheduled for the summer. However, this year's main preparation work is still our first phase of Marvel's assembly work, Avengers. The team will be formed in June at the latest, and it will be screened at the end of the year along the path of Avatar. I also hope that this movie can have the same momentum as Avatar. If nothing unexpected happens, it will still be directed by me. Hiss. Everyone took a breath of cold air. In a fantasy novel, they should just shout, my son, you have the talent of an emperor. Pa, he is wrong. It should be this boy, who is so terrifying. Even Nolan felt a sense of pride. After all, before he filmed The Dark Knight, he never thought that the audience would buy it so much, which made him feel very stressed now. But when Lyman established the project, he dared to say that he would continue the miracle of Avatar dominating the charts. Such confidence made him feel very encouraged. At the end, Lyman, who felt that he was just announcing the news, calmed down and reported some information on the animation. First, the team for Marvel Animation has been initially established. Second, Despicable Me developed by Illumination Entertainment is about to be completed, and the release date can be prepared. However, Blue Butterfly Pictures had almost no experience in distributing animations, so this project naturally needed to leverage the power of the 5 major studios. After a round of discussions, it was initially decided to cooperate with Universal for distribution. If we really wanted to compare who had the strongest promotion ability in this field, it would of course be Disney, but the problem was that Disney was Lemon's #1 enemy, so he didn't consider it. Then in terms of games, the US version of League of Legends has been released, and the number of online users has been rising steadily. With sufficient funds for publicity and external relations, Riot can do more than in the past. However, in terms of other regions, it still needs to wait for internal coordination among agents, but the general competition system is being built. The S-game proposed by Lemon will also be held in 2012, giving an extra year for training and preparation. The Chinese version of the national server was launched 11 years ago. After everything was sorted out, the meeting was dispersed. When a group of people were walking out, Lemon stopped Zack Snyder, exchanged pleasantries for a while, and then talked about the sequel to 300. Find a day, go to Joseph and sign the contract. The budget is $110 million. As for the interior, I will ask the production department to start building the New Line studios. You will focus on the costumes, props, and casting, and try to enter the post-production by the end of August. The original director's camera movement and color grading were much worse than Zack Snyder's, and the taste was not right at all, which led to a big drop in the box office compared to the first film. Although this was also due to the plot setting, it would definitely be better to let Zack Snyder take over. How about the copyright? Don't worry, Frank Miller agreed. We will give him 10% of the project profit in exchange for the adaptation rights of the Marathon Battle of Xerxes. That's good. After he left, Maze came in and reported, "Boss, Kevin is already in the office." "Well, I'll be there right away." Lemon nodded, not seeming surprised. The Avengers project is a pivot point of Marvel's entire universe plan. Whether it succeeds or not basically represents the quality of the established shooting mode. This has risen to a major issue in decision making, and Kevin certainly attaches great importance to it. However, there is still some time before the specific start of filming. He only needs to negotiate the actors' salaries, and continue to refine the interior scenes of the New Line studios, and prepare the props and costumes. There is no trouble. But after meeting Kevin, Lemon found that he was thinking about how to spread the news well. Lemon thought for a while and suggested, how about the Golden State Comic Con in July? The production method of one ring after another is a conception that Hollywood has never had. It is more beneficial for us to let the audience know. First, it can gather people's hearts. Second, it can warm up in advance. And third, it can join forces to strive for upstream and downstream channel resources. Then, what else can stop the Avengers in the film market at the end of the year? Golden State Comic Con? Kevin murmured and repeated. Yes, such a suitable platform is the best place to speak out. Kevin said excitedly, I will discuss with the organizer and strive for the best display area in advance to arrange our project element. Don't worry, I still have to go to China. Let's talk about it in detail when I come back. Chapter 950 To the eve of departure. Making friends with China Film Group is Lemon's move to Asia in the global market. Although there is actually a relationship between Firefly and China Film Group, after all, the two sides will definitely have contact regarding the introduction of films. This relationship is not much different from other Hollywood manufacturers, and what Lemon wants is the additional preferential treatment after treating everyone equally. It's just that this special status is not so easy to get. Even if China Film Group has a good impression of Firefly and has repeatedly cooperated with publicity and paid for it out of its own pocket, it still needs a truly in-depth opportunity to continuously reinforce this impression in order to achieve a long-term interest partner beyond a short-term interest ally. Whether it is Marvel's actual interests or considering the rising film market in the future, this trip to China is necessary, and Lemon will go with the Avatar crew. Of course, there is no other reason for the latter, it's just on the way. After all, Columbia has long decided to go to China and Japan, two regions where the screening was delayed, to promote the platform, but they initially decided to go to Japan first and then China, but at Lemon's suggestion, they will fly to China first. In the study, that is, on the evening of January 2nd, Lyman was thinking about some things he needed to prepare for his trip to China. He was not worried about the promotion of Avatar. After all, Avatar had grossed over $1 billion worldwide in 17 days. The audiences in China and Japan had long been looking forward to it. There would be no problem with China Films Agency, so he was preparing some more detailed information about Pacific Rim. In the final analysis, Pacific Rim was the most sincere prop for his trip. It was also the first special effects blockbuster with a value of over 100 million yuan with multiple investors. Since China joined the WTO, it would also abide by the rules of joint production, which must be a great temptation for China Film. Co-production? The exchange of interests and mutual benefit in essence, are not as simple as outsiders imagine. A proposal like Lyman's that is clean and neat without traps, and it is not a literary and artistic theme that focuses on exploring social issues. The two together are rare, and China Film has never encountered such a good thing. So after a period of hesitation, it still made up its mind to invest, but they still wanted to know more, which is why Lyman went there. As for the second point to be prepared, it is the right to use the well-known monsters in the monster universe, that is, the right to use Godzilla and its derivative monsters. This matter is not difficult to say. As early as more than 10 years ago, DC and Warner had briefly rented the image of Godzilla. The copyright owner Toho Pictures was also willing to actively explore the commercial attributes of Godzilla. After all, the movies about Godzilla they shot themselves were over and over again, and the image potential in Japan was almost exhausted. For example, in 2004, Toho Pictures launched the last Godzilla movie of the same name, Godzilla: Final Battle, with an investment of nearly 1.7 billion yen, but the box office revenue was only 1.26 billion yen, and the number of viewers was less than 1 million, which was the third from the bottom among all the works in history. Toho Pictures completely announced that the development of Godzilla was shelved. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that this series has been filmed to the 28th film, and there is no room for exploration at all. If it continues to be filmed, it will only continue to lose money. However, if they simply apply for the image rental, they will also face the fallout from Toho in the future. In the original time and space, after King of the Monsters, Legendary Pictures, which was acquired by Warner, had to renegotiate with Toho for the use of Godzilla's image, which was a loss. So after a period of consideration, Lyman's response was to not only grant Toho Pictures exclusive authorization to distribute the project in Japan, but also to strive for them to join the investors with the right to use the image, rather than introducing funds or expanding the share for bundling. Because Toho does not know Lyman's ambitions, it is very likely that they will have the same indifferent attitude as in the previous life. Moreover, the part of the profit sharing of China Film is that they have this value and future expectations. The Japanese market is still not very friendly to Firefly, which mainly focuses on live-action movies, so there is no need to make such a big bet. There is a saying in the film industry that the greater the benefit, the greater the investment. China Film is the largest and most worthy company of man media in the Asian market. It is in urgent need of policy support and publicity. In comparison, Toho Film is far behind. Too much flattery means too much damage to one's own interests. Although this idea is utilitarian, it is indeed the most appropriate approach. After thinking about this, Lyman sorted out the information, took out his mobile phone and called Ryan. "I'll trouble you with the preparation of the tuna. As for the role, I talked to Ledger this morning about the blind man. He promised to make time for it, but you still have to confirm the actor's contract and salary with his agent." "I see. Are you flying to China tomorrow?" "Yeah." Ryan said a few words of concern and hung up the phone. In this project with multiple reversals, the male protagonist is not a traditional Hollywood-style flat positive role, which is just right for Heath Ledger to play. When Lyman decided to shoot this film, he actually had this idea. Furthermore, Heath Ledger, who has gained more attention for his role as the Joker in The Dark Knight, will naturally be a bonus for the tuna project. If he changes his image and plays a villain who is not so evil, but relies on the sympathy of others to gain benefits, it is better than staying in the Joker's mask and being burdened by the audience's favor. Yes, He has been embarrassed by the limitations of roles recently, which is what Lyman discovered when he heard Ryan talk about it some time ago. It may be that he has not encountered roles and works with enough room for development. The result of the audience's pickiness is that he has started several independent films, and the media and the audience have complained that he has regressed. After all, the audience doesn't care that it is not easy for an actor to encounter a good role and a script that is conducive to personal development. It is better to cover up his eye drama that fans talk about with relish, give the audience a new impression, and open up new acting paths. There is no better movie than The Tuner. Blind people, reversal, multi-line narrative, combination of reality and fiction. The characterization of the protagonist in The Tuner is extremely complex and will not be flattened. It is used to reshape the audience's favor and use the topic of acting to hype traffic and arouse the curiosity of movie fans. It can be said that it kills two birds with one stone. As for the choice of other roles, they are basically acting schools. For example, the cheating police chief Lyman plans to let Josh Brolin, the hunter in No Country for Old Men, play the role. The naive heroine is considered Kat Dennings. The second female, who kills her husband, becomes the beginning of the whole story. Felicity Huffman, who was nominated for the Best Actress Oscar for Crossing America. After picking these people from the list of actors and giving them to Johnson to inquire about the schedule, Lyman boarded the flight to Beijing. Chapter 953, All Parties Surge. While Lyman was still flying in the sky, China Film was busy. One was the promotion of Avatar, the other was about co-production. As for the latter, after the film purchasing team came back, they reported the details and attached a cooperation proposal. Several film purchasing personnel immediately talked about Firefly's strength and rise in Hollywood, and they recognized Firefly's production ability. Of course, director Han was a little confused, and the more he listened, the more suspicious he became. He often dealt with film studios from various countries, and he was deeply touched by the words no profit, no early rise. After all, many co-production projects were actively promoted by China Film. On the other hand, if there were really people who could abide by those rigid terms, would they still feel that they were not at a disadvantage? However, after asking carefully, director Han learned that Firefly had been struggling in the North American market, but now wanted to engage in the film market business between overseas regions, and the channels were not yet perfect. Knowing this, director Han could understand the practice of Firefly taking the initiative to find him, which also made him begin to seriously examine the so-called co-production. After reading it over and over again, director Han's heart gradually warmed up. The main reason was that the co-production of special effects blockbusters was something that China Film had never facilitated before, and this could be considered a kind of political achievement. Looking at the attitude of Firefly and the words of several employees, it was guaranteed that both parties had made real financial investments, and it was impossible to be a joke. Whether it was successful or not was another matter. Since he knew the other party's purpose and released such goodwill, director Han had the idea of implementing the co-production. After all, there are too few people with experience in how to shoot special effects blockbusters. Having an opportunity to continue to learn from others will definitely be good for the factorization of the mainland film industry. For this reason, he actively ran around in the days approaching the Spring Festival and held several meetings in succession on co-production with Firefly Pictures. While reaching an internal consensus, he made intensive preparations. Although many people at the meeting also raised many hidden dangers, for example, whether it would be difficult to adapt to the local climate, cultural barriers, and make a joke, whether the other party was really determined to co-produce, so as not to regret it at that time. But if they don't seize the opportunity, they will definitely not be able to take this step. All of this was suppressed under the thought that, even if it was a typical co-production, other studios would have to see the effect. Of course, it was not only Firefly that would take advantage of the situation, but also director Han understood it. In order to gain the initiative, he began to encourage private film companies in the mainland to participate in the investment, because the nature of China Film meant that they were very delicate in dealing with things. For a time, before Firefly arrived, co-production became a point of concern for many people. Inside Huayi Brothers, Comrade Xiao Wang sat on the sofa, looking at Comrade Leo Wang staring at a document in his hand, thinking, is there something you want me to do? Comrade Xiao Wang asked. China Film has a co-production project that they want to promote. Comrade Leo Wang recounted the whole process, and at the end, he added, I think it's very interesting. How much investment is required to co-produce a blockbuster? I'm not sure yet, but Comrade Leo Wang took a look at the industry information he collected at the first time, the documents about Man Media's business development, production projects, and Lemon's personal resume made him very excited. Nothing else. 8 out of 10 projects are profitable, 1 is break even, and 1 is a small loss. The success rate of over 80% is really hard to ignore. This is also the strongest means for the rapid rise of this studio. Huawei itself started with director Feng, so how could it not be clear about the role of a guaranteed director in the studio? In other words, high return rate, high cash flow, and high output are really rare for the film industry. As long as you have this production record, you will be looked up to wherever you go. In fact, Comrade Leo Wang's current conception of the company's layout situation is very wonderful. In 2009, the total box office of Chinese films was only 6.206 billion. Huawei Brothers successfully went public with the momentum of being the first in performance and became the pioneer of private film companies in the mainland. However, after the blessing of capital, Comrades Wang, who were already spending money lavishly, suddenly found that there was nothing good to do with this money. Why did they have to make movies? Then it was the defilmization ridiculed by many writers, actively avoiding the risks of the film market. Although they have been producing films, the shift in their focus has already led to their embarrassment later. Let's put it this way. Disney's capital operation model is so mature. They are actively embracing the film industry, and they still operate the film industry as a leading industry. This is enough to show Huawei's short-sightedness. In fact, it is certainly right to use capital advantages to lay out the upstream and downstream of the industry. Many studios do this after they become rich, but the problem is that no one really wants to defilm. Although compared with the film market, the extremely high rate of return brought by capital investment is easy to make people obsessed with it. After all, the model of using capital leverage to acquire, cash out, and profit from upstream and downstream industries has a much faster economic growth rate than making movies. But the value of entertainment cannot be summarized by box office data alone. Without movies, who knows you Huawei? Without movies, who goes to Disneyland? Of course, Huawei in 2010 was not outrageous. After receiving this news, Comrade Leo Wang first thought about whether he could hype up the stock price. After participating in the investment, China's co-production of commercial blockbusters is definitely good news, but he also seriously evaluated various matters in it. Comrade Leo Wang even vaguely sensed that Firefly would invest seriously in the film because it had demand. From the perspective of industrial layout, if Firefly wanted to vigorously develop overseas markets in the next step, it would be inseparable from strong distributors in various places. Among them, China Film is one of the largest distributors in Asia. After all, Huawei's own film distribution depends on China Film's allocation, and he himself has a very good relationship with director Han. The sudden invitation made him active, but the only entry point was co-production. What else could Huawei provide besides funds? After careful consideration, Comrade Leo Wang noticed another point, that is, the hard rule of joint production. That is, foreign actors shall not exceed 2/3. That is, the number of Chinese local performers participating in the performance shall exceed 1/3 of the actor team. And from the trends we have mastered, we can also know that China Film also attaches great importance to this project. At the same time, China Film does not train artists. Leo Wang's plan is not complicated. On the one hand, he actively cooperates. Because it is a joint production, China Film will definitely invest the best resources to make Firefly feel sincere in order to focus on the typical, so as to attract other foreign investors. After Leo Wang instinctively sensed these things, he could do some things in advance. Chapter 954, the first step of the side system. In the early morning of winter in Beijing, the sun could not dispel the cold of last night, and even the wind blew straight into the collar. At the capital airport, among the groups of people preparing to pick up or send people to the plane, Andrew, who had just parked his car and walked in, was particularly eye-catching. Although the locals were not surprised by white people, they would inevitably look at them twice when they saw them. However, as the site manager in New York City, and now in charge of company promotion in China, Andrew had long been accustomed to such looks, at least he thought so, and it didn't hinder his work anyway. With the big boss coming, he had a lot on his mind. From the perspective of interests, he was also eager to let his boss see his efforts or site progress. Moreover, he believed that he had made a lot of efforts in promoting the Pacific Rim project, and his credit was there. After all, during these days in China, he had the opportunity to show his skills, and his results were not bad. In summary, the site team was built, and the company's promotion and distribution rules and regulations were implemented and localized. In addition, the film industry forces in the mainland, such as China Film, Huai, Guangwang, Bona, and Xiaoxiang Film Studio, were initially known. This made Andrew feel very accomplished. And it was not just about building a system. He also spent a lot of effort to obtain the distribution rights of October Besieged in the United States. It was a bit regrettable that Bona did not agree with the profit-sharing model and asked for a buyout. It was not known whether the $2.2 million spent could be recovered. However, considering that Firefly had no foundation, it was necessary to gain people's trust first to open up the situation. The boss and others were very supportive of this autonomy, and they were not worried that the decision would be rejected. When the work was handed over in December last year, Andrew talked to the big boss Lyman. That day in the office, the work direction discussed also included the distribution of Chinese language films, because the big boss meant to establish a cooperative relationship of mutual help and interest binding. So it is not enough to just come in, of course, but also to help some people go out. This is slightly different from the domestic distribution in the United States, but it is the thing that can win the favor of Chinese filmmakers the most. Do you think that others want to enter the Chinese market with a lot of barriers, but Chinese language films want to enter other regional markets without barriers? According to Andrew's investigation, Chinese language films are only very influential in Asia, and there are also promotion channels in some European countries such as France and Italy, but in the United States, they are frequently blocked. In the early years, some actions of Miramax also made the image of American studios bad, lowering prices and reducing revenue sharing, all of which were done when signing contracts, which is also the source of the setting of the first chapter. An even more disgusting thing happened during the release of director Zhang's Hero. At that time, the film sold very well in Asia. After Weinstein saw the business opportunity and took the initiative to come over, he competed with Columbia and other manufacturers for the distribution rights in the United States, and then offered a higher price in the bidding link, so that Columbia took the initiative to withdraw. As a result, when the other party returned, Weinstein suddenly turned hostile and refused to admit it. He requoted a very low amount. The incident happened suddenly. Miramax was the only American distributor in the mainland at that time. Moreover, if it was delayed until Hero was taken off the screen, Miramax would definitely not be the one to suffer losses. In the end, they admitted it. However, after Hero was released in the United States, there were problems with the relevant profit sharing. First, the box office was concealed, and then there were different opinions on whether to share the total box office or the net profit. Director Zhang suffered a loss again, and was taught a lesson. Moreover, this kind of lawsuit with conflicting interests can easily fall into a deadlock, and is very troublesome. Miramax, which has a favorable geographical location, is not afraid at all. It is very smooth to play traps. After this incident, many manufacturers are unwilling to deal with American studios. Who are they disgusted by? This also makes Columbia, which is much more honest, stand out and almost become the general agent of Chinese language films in the United States. Although Columbia's direct distribution profit is not much, since the decline of kung fu films, Chinese films have nothing to compete with in the United States. There are many hidden benefits, such as more indicators for Columbia, more convenience in scheduling, and China Film Group is not bad at this set of means of winning over After a while, in this era, where the revenue sharing is only 13%, and China Film Group does not participate in the publicity and distribution model, meaning that if you want to pay for the publicity expenses of American films in China, you can, but China Film Group will not bear it. In Hollywood, the formulation of publicity, usually the producer and the distributor will reach a consensus, how much money to spend, or what means to use for hype. Basically first discuss and then implement. All the expenses in the publicity process have their own share. This is also a factor that American studios are not enthusiastic about the Chinese market. For example, at the beginning of Marvel, the main creators basically flew around Europe for publicity and did not come to China because it was not worth it. Even for the promotion of Harry Potter in China, they would rather send a Chinese to lead the team. It can be seen that their attitude, such a comparison, Chinese filmmakers like Columbia more. But now under Lyman's strategy, the movies that Firefly can be introduced are almost all paid out of pocket to cooperate with the action, and the main creators appearing is commonplace, which has gradually established a certain foundation for Firefly in China. In another time and space, Disney acquired Marvel and then began to slowly embrace the huge returns obtained in China, which is a clear proof. In other words, Lyman knows what methods will make people comfortable, so he will not miss the opportunity to bet in advance. Therefore, Andrew was personally instructed to participate in the distribution of some Chinese language films in the United States every year. It is also important to expand the influence of this part. For this reason, Lyman also gave him some suggestions, such as giving priority to costumes and actions, giving priority to works of great directors such as Zhang, Guoxi, Chen, Cage, and Chen Kexin, and giving priority to literary and artistic works with good reputation and depth. These are the experiences that Lyman heard and summarized in the industry in his previous life. The number of Chinese language films exported to the United States is small, and there are even fewer that can achieve results. If you want to spend less money, just choose according to these three categories. It was also because of the boss's order that Andrew chose October Besieged, a costume action film with the right subject matter. The shooting team and the producer brought together the top talents from Hong Kong and the mainland, and the people were also right, and the box office was not low. The reputation was good, and the quality was considered good among the same type of subjects. Therefore, when Andrew made an offer, he beat Columbia and offered $2.2 million to win the US distribution rights of this film. Although he had no confidence in making a profit, at least he did it completely according to the boss's request, and there was only merit, no fault. Chapter 955 Schedule. While the co-production attracted many people's attention, Lyman, who flew here with the main creators of Avatar who chartered a plane, was chatting with Gyro about the preparation of the project. Just like in his previous life, Lyman gave the filming of Pacific Rim to Gyro. After all, this guy likes to tinker with monster images the most, and monsters are naturally within his hobbies. After getting off the plane, accompanied by the reception staff of China Film and Andrew, the group went to the hotel. Except that the main creators of Avatar appeared and attracted the attention of some fans. The whole airport pickup process seemed very low-key, at least it seemed so. There was no fanfare, and no advance notice to the media. However, after a good rest, the necessary publicity was quickly launched. However, Lyman's focus was not on the promotion of Avatar. The next morning, after dealing with some people's courtesy, Lyman met director Han in the office of China Film. Sitting at the seat, while greeting each other, Lyman looked up and looked at this important figure in the Chinese film industry. Although director Han is 56 years old, he looks like he is in his early 40s. He has a kind face and a clean-shaven beard. The main topic they can talk about is naturally Pacific Rim. The proposal has been submitted a long time ago, and both parties are thinking about implementing it. There are only a few points that have not been negotiated yet. One is the funding and profit sharing, the second is the crew, the third is the location, and the fourth is the expected release date. Listening to Lyman enumerating the places where there are hidden dangers one by one, director Han also found that he is also a vigorous and resolute person. However, it is not feasible to make a co-production without clarifying the filming work at home and abroad. After all, in recent days, these issues have basically been discussed in the internal meetings of China Film. How to divide them, both parties must reach a consensus. Lyman went on to say, as for the director, I already have a candidate. I believe you have met him yesterday. As for the budget, we have roughly calculated it to be around 150 million, and the Chinese investment will not be less than 50 million. I need to point out in advance that due to the adjustment of some subsequent works, we will introduce Toho Pictures as the producer of this project. As for other aspects, we can discuss it. Hearing what Lyman said, Director Han's eyes lit up, and he was not polite and directly raised several points of his concerns. I hope that the project funds and current income will be financially accounted for by the third-party agency we hired. No problem. In addition to the completion guarantee, we will hire firefighter insurance, and we will also hire PricewaterhouseCoopers to settle the financial accounts. This can ensure that the investment results of both parties will not be concealed. Do we want to arrange personnel for the director's team? Director Gyro has his own assistant, but in addition to his team, 2 people can join. Behind the scenes positions such as camera work and lighting, you can arrange some of them. We are a co-producer, and we will definitely abide by the hard rules. As for the actors, the male and female protagonists, no, the female lead can be played by a mainland actor, but the male lead can't. Lyman had thought about these issues long before he made the decision, and now he still had a correct understanding. Although Pacific Rim is aimed at the Asian region, it does not mean that it will give up the American and European markets. What's more, if the male lead is a Chinese face, what will the Korean and Japanese audiences think? Will they boycott? These are all problems. On the contrary, if the male lead is a Native American actor, it will be more convenient, and in terms of the arrangement of the roles, it is enough to take proper care of the Asian market. He is not really here to give benefits and ignore the overall situation. Mutual benefit, reciprocity and win-win cooperation are his goals. In fact, he even has plans for the main battle measure and personnel deployment. China's Storm Red, the United States' Wanderer, Japan's Tango Wolf, Russia's Cherno Alpha, and Australia's Eureka Raider. These mecha pilots have roles to describe, and even the supporting roles are taken into account. The audience group in the cities along the Pacific Rim is always stronger than other blockbusters. In other words, this is a hodgepodge under the shell of Hollywood. It uses a mature production system to make a blockbuster movie that can be accepted by Asian audiences, and then uses the personnel configuration and regional sentiment cards to hype topics. By the way, it can also use the resources of channel dealers to expand its own channels and establish its brand. Lyman thought so and did so. Seeing this, Director Han took the initiative to skip the actor issue. In his mind, Lyman was already very sincere. As long as the proportion of Chinese participation in production and shooting can reach 1/3, the backstage will definitely be better than the front stage. Of course, there must be Chinese actors on the front stage, but it is enough. If everything is fine, then let's talk about the location of the film. Lyman raised his hand and gestured, just like the title. Because of the background setting, the location will be a city on the Pacific coast. For the mainland, I'm considering shooting in Macau and Guangzhou, mainly in Macau. Is it a tourist city? If the crew goes there to shoot, it won't affect anything too much, and it can also drive the tourism industry. I believe it will get policy support. Hearing what Lyman said, Director Han couldn't help but look at him more. He thought that this foreign devil was one of the few foreign directors who could treat China objectively. It turned out that he also had such a deep understanding of the geography and culture of the mainland. However, this analysis does make sense. At first, Director Han thought that he would choose to shoot in Hong Kong Island. He didn't expect that there was such a trick. But Director Han knew very well that shooting in Macau would definitely please more mainland audiences. Speaking of which, he is now more satisfied. A conversation with Lyman has dispelled his few concerns, and he has also raised the idea of providing more resource support. This co-production was meant to be a model, but since they were so tactful, the script was also a standard commercial routine. If the box office was a big hit, it would be a great achievement. So, director Han was secretly thinking that, if the quality of the finished film was guaranteed, the publicity and promotion would definitely be the highest standard in the future. If you check out the 90% screening schedule and go to the cinema, only Pacific Rim is available, it will be a big hit. But considering the schedule, some time periods are not easy to arrange. Of course, Lyman didn't know what director Han was thinking. He just put forward his plan and continued, "We plan to start filming in April at the latest, and enter the post-production in July. The schedule should be October. It just so happens that there is a National Day holiday in October, and there is no shortage of audience base. How about it? October? That works," Director Han thought. Chapter 956 Excitement. After Director Han resolved his doubts, he became more excited and chatted with Lyman for a long time before the meeting ended. But what Lyman didn't know was that the moment he walked into the China Film Building, it reached the ears of those who were interested. Inside the Huawei building, Liu Tao, the co-general manager of the artist department, received an order from the big boss, Comrade Liu Wang, in the past 2 days, asking him to coordinate the schedules of his artists, with the purpose of eyeing the participating roles in Pacific Rim. Yes, whether or not to participate in the investment, Huawei still has quite rich artist resources. Huawei, which has only been listed for a few months, has reached its peak of influence, and has recruited a large number of powerful and famous actors in the circle, and it is full of talents. This morning, Liu Tao just greeted several internal agents, and went to Comrade Liu Wang's office, to report on his work. "I've given the order, but who should we promote? What do you suggest?" "Li Bingbing, she's more suitable." "Well, you can take her out for more activities. The specifics will depend on what China Film and Firefly think. We can just try our best." As a first-line actress in the mainland, she has experience in Hollywood crews, and is also the top artist in Hawaii. Considering all these aspects, she is indeed the most likely to win. "Boss, I heard that they have officially talked with China Film." "Well, tonight there will be a cocktail party for the main creators of Avatar, and they will also be there. At that time, I will take you and Li Bingbing together. It's up to you to decide how to approach her and leave a good impression." In the evening, the cursory socializing made Lyman, who was used to this kind of place, still feel a little tired. Apart from China Film Group, almost all the powerful entertainment companies in the mainland came. On the contrary, Lyman didn't pay much attention to those actresses who were dressed up. After being in Hollywood for a long time, this pink attack had no effect on Lyman. Instead, he had a good chat with Comrade Wang and Comrade Wang, and Yu Dongxiang, the boss of Boner. There was nothing else. Director Han also mentioned that among the Chinese funds, Boner and Huawei Association jointly invested, but did not occupy the copyright, and participated in the project as regional co-producers. On the next day, after the vigorous promotion of China Film Group in theaters in various places, the screening of Avatar successfully caused a great momentum. In the hotel, Lyman was talking to Gyro about filming. This guy has now entered the working state, holding the script in his hand and thinking about the specific imaging effect in his mind. Because it is a co-production, the storyboard should be more detailed so that the filming staff can understand. He sat on the sofa and discussed something with the drama manager of his studio. Lyman also made some suggestions from time to time. "Mr. Last, how do we arrange the staffing? How do we manage the Chinese filming crew?" "Don't worry, you just take care of our people, and China Film will take care of them." Lyman's opinion was simple. Separate management would avoid conflicts caused by different filming habits. Apart from other things, Hollywood staff are much lazier. If they exceed the time limit, it will be considered overtime, and they may not be happy about it. Moreover, the eating habits of both sides are different, and the meals must be different. There are so many trivial matters, it is better for each to take care of their own things. Anyway, everyone can reasonably divide the work during filming, and do their own things well, and nothing else matters. It was also on this basis that Lyman held several large and small meetings with China Film and quickly set up the framework of the crew. However, during this process, the energy of Avatar in the mainland exceeded the expectations of many people. Early morning of January 7th. The box office after the first day of the release was quickly summarized by many media people. 35 million in a single day, which directly led to the single day box office record of the mainland film market. What's more terrible is that the cumulative box office of other films was compressed to less than 1 million, so that it can be ignored in the statistical report. Yes, if you really want to explain, it seems that all the theater audiences in China are watching a movie on this day, and its name is Avatar. With such performance, October Besieged is finished. Someone in the film section of a news editorial department shook his head. More than 80% decline. It can't stand it. Although Firefly reached a cooperation deal with Bernard a few days ago and bought out the US distribution rights of this film, after Avatar was released, October Besieged became a cannon fodder in the schedule and was sentenced to death from the possibility of profit. It was also an old unlucky guy. When the news of the big explosion in the mainland and Japan was passed back to the United States, it deeply stimulated the bosses of the studios there. There is no way. The decline of Avatar was small, and it often even had zero decline or reverse decline. After breaking 1 billion in 17 days, someone suddenly told them that China and Japan jointly contributed $8.6 million in box office in a single day, which seemed even more exaggerated. More importantly, a piece of information revealed from it is surprising. The Chinese film market has doubled for several consecutive years, and such market potential has exploded since the beginning of 2010. It seems that the snowball is getting bigger and bigger. It is really hard to say where the upper limit of Avatar is. However, one thing that the American film media knows is that the box office of Avatar has approached the 1.5 billion mark in less than 4 weeks of screening. The suspense about breaking the record of Titanic is suddenly not so high. After all, according to this trend, after so many days, the 3D screenings are still full and tickets are hard to come by. It is conceivable how strong the audience's desire to watch movies is. In other words, it is very likely that overseas ticket banking countries such as the UK, France, Germany, Italy, China, Japan, and South Korea will each contribute $100 million to the box office, especially France. If you are optimistic, there is a great probability of 150 million. According to this estimate, these places add up to a box office market of at least 700 million, and it is not a big problem to calculate 600 million in the remaining 80 plus places. North America and Canada have already won 360 million. According to the downward trend, it is easy to break 600 million, and 700 million is not difficult. In other words, this wave of outbreaks in China and Japan directly pushed Avatar to a landing target of more than 2 billion. What is the concept of 2 billion? The threshold for the first place, the case that the box office market is destined to be recorded in the history of film, and the offline market and peripheral development behind the box office of more than 6 billion, means that Firefly Pictures has a gold mine in its film library. Don't forget that Avatar has a sequel plan. So too, with the unexpectedly hot performance of China film, some people have become more enthusiastic about the so-called co-production special effects blockbuster Pacific Rim, and have fallen into an indescribable fantasy. Exciting. Deeply exciting. 35 million in a single day, a record that is more outrageous than a big ship anyone would have to reconsider. Lemon is even busier, but the pace of the new project is accelerating. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 957, The Upper Limit of Exposure. As of January 13th, Avatar has made $100 million in IMAX theaters for the first time. With the audience's continued enthusiasm, even if they have watched the movie once, they will go to the IMAX theater to experience the different atmosphere of the movie. It seems that it is only a matter of time before it breaks 200 million. It is worth mentioning that according to reliable information, chain theaters led by Emperor Entertainment and Court are preparing to increase investment in the replacement of IMAX projection equipment. In fact, it is also because of the outstanding performance of Avatar that both the audience and practitioners are confident in the prospects of IMAX projection, and the audience does not mind spending a little more money to enjoy a better viewing effect. Columbia's general manager of distribution said that Avatar has won $1.4 billion worldwide, and the goal of $2 billion is not far away. He is even optimistic that it can hit the $3 billion mark. It can only be said that Lyman has a very unique vision. This is not the first time he has chosen a hit, but such an insightful and courageous choice is still amazing. After all, he took over this abandoned project from Disney. The US film market has entered its 5th week. Avatar easily won the first place, defeating Lionsgate's new film The Spy Next Door, and continuing to top the North American box office chart. Compared with last week's drop of only 15%, it is a bit shocking. The weekend revenue of about $36 million has undoubtedly become the highest data in the same period in film history. At the same time, the North American box office of Avatar has officially reached about $490 million. It seems that it will only take a few more days to surpass the second place The Dark Knight, and then it will threaten the former champion in film history Titanic. From mid-December last year to the beginning of January, all new films released in the global film market were eclipsed by Avatar. For example, The Mainland was beaten by October Besieged, and in the United States, the most unlucky one was undoubtedly Robert Downey Jr.'s new film Sherlock Holmes. To be honest, the quality of this film is quite high. If it is released in a good time, it may become a hit. Unfortunately, the purpose of diverting the audience of Avatar by playing the contrast card was not achieved. The start was very aggrieved. It failed to break through the blockade of Avatar in the first week of its release, and it was not even the second place after that. After more than 3 weeks of screening, it only took $157 million. It seems that $200 million in North America is its limit. Of course, in addition to the producer Warner Brothers, this matter is very concerned. The attention of other studios has been involved in another piece of news. That is, the mainland film market has surpassed the UK and become the 3rd largest box office of Avatar. Behind this outstanding output, there are only more than 4,000 screens. The number of theaters is not large, but in terms of efficiency, it exceeds too many regions with high screen values. Its significance represents the prosperity of emerging markets. If a work can reach a market of $200 million at its peak, it cannot attract the attention of Hollywood capital, then Hollywood will not become a global film center. Perhaps the market is not free enough due to its strict introduction of quota system and censorship system, but China, which remains vigorous in the global economic recession, is enough for everyone to see its charm. Moreover, considering the characteristics of the tertiary industry generally lagging behind the secondary industry, the better the economic development of China, the more explosive growth their tertiary industry will continue to see in the next few years. As for us, in a country with a large population, with the increase in per capita income, they are all potential moviegoers. In other words, based on strong market demand, the number of their cinemas will also grow explosively. It should be noted that their basic ticket prices are actually very high, more expensive than ours. For example, the 3D screening of Avatar costs nearly $30. If such a high ticket price environment is maintained, when the total number of Chinese cinemas grows to 3,200 and the number of moviegoers is maintained, in theory, China can surpass the United States and become the world's largest vote bank. If you don't investigate, you won't know that they gave us such a big surprise, and it's no wonder that our old friends are so active. In a large reception room, then president of the Motion Picture Association of America, stood up and explained to several studio bosses the reasons behind the explosion of Avatar in China. Michael, don't you have anything to say? Kevin Tsujihara, the president of Warner Brothers, looked at Michael Linton, the executive of Columbia, jokingly. What do you need to say? Isn't the purpose of us sitting here today to discuss how to get more from China, at least in line with international norms? But how to fight for this more market quota? Michael Linton changed the subject. I remember that in 2 years, China and the United States will renegotiate the trade agreement. I hope that everyone in our film industry can continue to support Hollywood's bundled negotiations, so we have to work hard towards the White House and let the president know our needs. Well, that's a good idea, Disney executive Robert Iger affirmed. Just like in the previous life, the event that pushed the agenda was still the explosion of Avatar in China, which made these media bosses who were not close to each other in normal times actively one after another, and promised to stand in the same trench. Although competitors are enemies, and they all hope that their competitors will suffer and give up their market share, under the premise of fierce competition, Hollywood is still willing to work together in the face of the growing Chinese market that cannot be ignored. This is also the significance of the existence of the Film Association. In the United States, almost all industries with a certain level will set up associations to implement industry supervision or exert influence in front of the White House to promote the passage of bills that are beneficial to the industry. Perhaps the example of Hollywood is not enough in terms of policy. If the election of the president is closely related to an association, the influence of the association can be clearly felt. The Rifle Association has a population of 1.5%, and most of them are white. Some of the recent events should know why this association has stood firm. Of course, as a film association that often deals with state governments and legislators, it is difficult to say that its position has always been unified and harmonious, but in any case, opening up the market is always beneficial to all Hollywood manufacturers. On this point, everyone quickly reached a consensus. This is what happened today. The topics discussed later were nothing more than how to build momentum in advance through the legislators they have won over, and reasonable public relations. Anyway, a few years ago, people might not have considered what would happen in a region 20 years from now, but when a result that is so close and represents possibility appears, the temptation is hard to resist. It doesn't have to be Avatar, but a market for Avatar is possible. Chapter 958. The pancake is not tasty. While Hollywood capital was plotting to renegotiate trade in order to open up the mainland film market, Lyman's plan was more sophisticated than Th's, more cooperative and mutually beneficial, and would not make people feel coerced. In the meeting room of China Film Group, Wang Chang was also happy as he watched the situation of co-production gradually become clear. Because he had strong ability to translate between Chinese and English and worked in China Film Group, he was an insider, so he would be one of the Chinese managers of the crew in the next co-production, which made him full of confidence in his future rise in China Film Group. You know, he had been in China Film Group for less than 3 years, and usually he was just doing foreign business, responsible for going to English-speaking regions or major film festivals to find those manufacturers to select suitable films for batch entry. Most of the batch films are bought in large quantities, like the foreign films broadcasted by many TV stations. Movie channels are entered in this way, which is also one of the ways to make profits from film copyrights, but the price is very cheap. He did not expect that this work experience and the Set 4 and Set 6 certificates that he would take when he was motivated when studying would give him the opportunity to jump out of his original position. This is probably considered external relations. After all, he knows about film shooting and distribution, has field experience, is still young, and has few people to train, so he was chosen. Wow, this is much more exciting than writing manuscripts, running around, and having no achievements for the leaders to see. If he waits until Pacific Rim is successful, it will be impossible not to get some credit. After all, the ending is foreshadowed, and then the second film Godzilla is filmed, so the background can be connected, and the 2 lines of monsters and mechas can be laid out in the long run, which will increase the commercial attributes and audience retention rate. Whether it is director Han, comrade Leo Wang, or even Burner's CEO Yu Dong, they are all very interested in this topic. In other words, Pacific Rim is not a simple creative concept proposed, but a whole set of purposeful development series. It seems that it can't be done in 2 or 3 films, which shows that the development cycle of this series is not short. Not short is good, having a purpose is good, and being prepared in advance is better. After listening to this, several partners agreed in their hearts. Wang Chang also agreed. The more he shoots, the greater his chance of promotion and the deeper his qualifications will be. That's why we brought in Toho Pictures. In fact, you all who have read the script know that the concept and selling point of Pacific Rim is the biological mutation and underground wormholes caused by nuclear waste, which led to the development of a series of savior scenes later. Therefore, we can completely expand this concept, not only telling the story of a human camp, but also spending more time talking about the monster camp. The effect of this is definitely 1 + 1 greater than 2, just like Avatar. This will be a brand new background of another world for us to develop. It is very novel and fresh. With enough visual effects technology, I believe the audience will buy it. Director Han, whose views have been overturned many times, had to look at this French director again with mixed feelings. Yes, no matter how you look at it, the plan and preparation of the project are too perfect, which suddenly made him feel that they deliberately came to him, giving the shooting concept and future prospects like a business invitation, and gathering resources from the Asian region to feed this so-called Monster Universe project. So too, the bigger and more delicious the pie drawn by the other party, the more they will pay for it. The basis of cooperation is essentially exchange, isn't it? On the side, Leo Wang was almost dying of gluttony. He couldn't imagine how much the so-called series slogans and the creation of a new Avatar world could increase the share price of Huawei, which participated in the investment. Yes, at this moment, he didn't care how much effort he had to make, but how to properly hype it up after the contract was confirmed, and actively shout under the banner of Avatar, that quickly broke 500 million yuan in China. You have to wait to make a movie, but hyping up the concept is really effective. Not long after the listing, Leo Wang quickly understood the principle of making money, and transformed himself into a qualified capitalist, not a boss of film and television investment. Similarly, President Yu of Burma swallowed his saliva silently. His current situation is not as good as Comrade Leo Wang, although his family background is still rich. After all, it is a bridge for the declining Hong Kong circle to go north, and he still makes a lot of money, but Burma has its own cinema chain, its own artist resources, and its production and distribution system. Why did Huawei take away its position as the first private enterprise? Moreover, he used to jump out of the China film system to work alone, so he is closer than his connections. Moreover, in the past 2 weeks, he had experienced the failure of October besieged city after a good start, which made him depressed. However, under the blueprint drawn by Firefly, he did not mind the previous failure. He wanted to make a big production of more than 1 billion RMB. This was called a big deal. Then, after explaining these plans, Lyman also gave a few soft suggestions. He did not deny the participation of China, but only made requirements for certain interests. Of course, this was also within the consideration of Director Han. He always felt that the other party would not sell goodwill for no reason. At the moment, Lyman proposed 3 points that he had discussed with Joseph and Lyman. 1. The hit movies produced by the two labels of Firefly and Marvel under Man Media will be given priority in the introduction indicators of China Film, and Man Media will guarantee to cooperate with China Film's publicity activities, meaning to pay for it out of pocket, but the opinions of Man Media will be consulted on the deletion of content. 2. Man Media sites in China are allowed to become the priority channel for the distribution of Chinese language films in the United States, among which Bernard and Huawei need to be given higher priority, and China Film should cooperate appropriately. 3. The party must ensure the maximum sharing of resources in the co-production project, including enjoying the exclusivity of the schedule. These 3 points are neither impossible nor too harsh, but they almost guarantee the rationality of Lyman's future layout means for the mainland. In other words, using interest bundling is of course not only to let the Chinese side enjoy the benefits of co-production, but Man Media must also have other rewards. After all, although the monster universe is in great need of the Asian market, it is not that Lyman cannot produce Pacific Rim on his own. It is just that it is more troublesome to distribute it, and the profit is less. But if there is no sharing, it is not certain which method can make more money. How can this loss be sustained without additional protection? Cooperation with the mentality of doing charity is a taboo in the business world. After these 3 points were raised, the scene became a little quiet for a while, but soon General Bernard Yu and Comrade Leo Wang nodded. There was no other reason. Both of them had no foundation for distribution in the United States. They used to cooperate with Columbia. Would the performance of Firefly soar by leaps and bounds? Based on their understanding of their own companies, this is obviously impossible. Of course, Lyman proposed these, only to increase the distribution options of Blue Butterfly Pictures and to have more business sources. He did not think about how much money to make. The key point was the statement of Director Han. Chapter 959 details. China Film Group can import 15 American films every year, but it can only be less, not more. To be honest, this number is not enough even for the 5 major companies, not to mention that Disney's family-friendly animations are often the focus of imports. Of course, from the perspective of China Film Group, it sometimes cannot only focus on profits, but also has to strictly review what kind of ideology the imported films want to spread. If it is just entertainment, then of course there is no problem, but the fear is that there are some bad things mixed in with the entertainment. So after hearing Lyman's request, Director Han did not think for long. We agree to the priority of the schedule, but Director Han emphasized the last word. Lyman also knew that conditions were always negotiable, and he calmly paid attention to Director Han's reply. As expected, Director Han did not dwell on the third point, and the restrictions he proposed were all around the first 2 points. In his mind, there can't be a quota for import indicators. Of course, this doesn't mean we are unwilling to import your films, but that your opportunities should be equal to other manufacturers' competition. After emphasizing the word should, Director Han changed the subject and said that he could give priority to sending the film purchase and review team to connect with Man Media's popular film projects. Lyman suddenly understood what he meant. This means that the initiative of importing must be firmly in the hands of China Film, but because China Film treats each overseas manufacturer at different levels of closeness, like Colombia's previous friendly business in China, China Film's return of favors is not low. Now, Man Media can also enjoy this implicit benefit instead of being publicly stated on paper. In other words, if Man Media can continue to maintain the strategy of cooperation and mutual benefit, China Film will not disappoint Lyman. This is probably what he hinted. Lyman understood. Then there is the matter of China Film's cooperation with China in the US distribution. Director Han also has his own little thoughts on this point. You know, the film itself is also a window facing the international community and can shape the image of the region. He hopes that Man Media can also cooperate with the films supported by China Film to be distributed in the US. Colombia is also doing this, but one more studio means one more publicity force. After discussing one by one, Lyman was very frank. No problem on my side, Mr. Han. Although these restrictions on details make the previous proposal that tends to Man Media no longer overbearing, Lyman's own requirements are not high. The only thing left is to use actions to show that his attitude can replace Colombia and become the first partner. Having restrictions is better than vague official rhetoric, and the layout in Asia can already gain a foothold. In the end, the group of people who had SIM exchanges quickly signed the cooperation agreement for Pacific Rim. In addition to following the specific rules of joint filming, in terms of funds, China Film will contribute 20 million. Boner and Huayi will each contribute 15 million US dollars, and in addition, when the schedule is announced, they will guarantee the best treatment in theater resources and publicity. The two sides also confirmed that during the filming process, China Film Group has the right to review and stop the filming. Any artistic processing of the form of consciousness that deviates from the creative concept must be affirmed by China Film Group before it can be carried out. After the dispatched filming team enters the crew, the management personnel of China Film Group will serve as the coordinating contact person. The scenes and roads required for filming will be coordinated by China Film Group. The completion guarantee and accident insurance will be supervised by China Film Group. The initial release date is October, and any accidents that deviate from the release date must be reported in time, otherwise it will be inconvenient to adjust, and the Chinese side will not be responsible, perhaps because it is the first special effects blockbuster co-production, and has to enjoy the domestic film sharing model. Director Han has been extremely cautious, and has been ensuring that the project will not make redline mistakes in all aspects. He is afraid that someone will be mentally paralyzed, have bad intentions, and turn a good thing into a bad thing, causing trouble. but from the results, the signing of the contract and the right to actively try and make mistakes and stop the project have made all parties happy. For China Film, this is a breakthrough in co-production of blockbuster films. Taking this opportunity, it may also attract manufacturers from other regions to actively contact China Film, which is very helpful for their international market influence, and they can also learn from Hollywood's production experience. For Man Media, under this system, their interests in China are well guaranteed. In the future, the box office of movies in the mainland market will continue to rise, and they can enjoy more dividends. Moreover, they can fully mobilize the channel power of Chinese film and television companies to pave the way for their international distribution, especially in Asia. For Bernard and Huai, co-production also has many benefits. Even if their proportion is not high in terms of profit sharing, the Chinese side is mainly China Film in terms of copyright, and they have little relationship with them. It reflects the support policy, but it is enough to satisfy them, and they are thinking about how to operate it to increase additional income or influence. As for how to smoothly enter the shooting stage next, the relevant personnel are already preparing. As a director, Gyro has been busy staying in the hotel. How is it? Are you still adapting? In the hotel, Lemon found Gyro. Fortunately, I went out for a walk the day before yesterday and found that it was different from my previous impression. Gyro shook his head. What's different? The market is huge, and the people's spirits are very good, which is completely different from the news reports. Those reporters like to attract attention. You understand what they say. Just take a look. By the way, do you have a specific idea about the filming? Gyro asked. Have you already agreed? Yes, they are already preparing the staff, and the scenery, costumes, and props will be quickly prepared, and then the filming will begin. What do you think? I will just be responsible for filming, Gyro said, and immediately picked up the draft paper for the image of the monster and started talking. It seems that he is more interested in the monster than the actor. However, I found that the audience here is very enthusiastic about watching movies. There are too many people queuing to buy tickets. I heard from the people who accompanied me that this is still a common thing. Of course, the main audience area of this project includes here. Pacific Rim, Gyro's studio participates in the box office share, and he likes this kind of subject matter, so he still seems very motivated. As for the enthusiasm for watching movies, it reminded Lemon of something his political teacher said when he was in school, that is, the contradiction between the public's material and cultural needs. In other words, the more spare money one has, the more willing one is to satisfy spiritual needs and enjoyment. This is also the key point for the explosion of many luxury brands, high consumption markets, and entertainment markets. Sometimes, the public does not care about the true value of a product at all. Everyone just hopes that the money they spend will make them happy. This also includes the concept of expected value. Chapter 960 Go back. Gyro, if there are any problems during the filming, remember to negotiate more, and don't create conflicts. Don't worry, I understand. He had just failed in Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. Now that he has received the project of Pacific Rim, he still wants to make a difference and stand out among the co-directors of Man Media. After discussing the preparations for the crew with Gyro, Lemon left. Returning to his room, he took out his mobile phone and called Blake. Your tasks are clear. As a producer, I won't say much about the Chinese side. You should communicate with them more about everything. We must control ourselves. Yes, boss, I will definitely take care of it. Also, remember to say hello to Scott on the special effects team. If the Chinese side wants to know anything, there is no need to hide it. In any case, these goodwill releases are also good for the project itself. I understand. I will arrange it now. The next day, Lemon went to the China Film building again and met with director Han. After greeting each other, they talked about business. This time, he was here to decide on the cast of the Chinese side. Actually, he was aware of some of the rumors. After all, no matter what, he couldn't resist the continuous signals from Comrade Leo Wang and General Yu. Thinking deeply, the level of this play is enough for the actors to strive for. How can the temptation be bad to be able to show their faces in a blockbuster internationally? Of course, Lemon didn't pay much attention to these trivial matters. Actors are just a part of the filming. It doesn't matter if he spends too much time auditioning one by one. Pacific Rim only needs acting experience to cope with it. Of course, it's better if the actor's acting skills are three-dimensional enough. Lyman said, I picked the list of actors you gave me. If there are no problems with the schedule, I will decide on these few people. The specific salary negotiation will be handled by China Film. Do you think it's okay? Director Han took the list and found that the role he was given was not low. Although there was only one female protagonist in the main role, the Storm Red had a lot of scenes. The major pilots in it were all Chinese movie stars in terms of setting, and the other was the supporting role among the supporting roles with face scenes. The heroine Li Bingbing, the three pilots of Storm Red Liu Dehe, Deng Chao, and Zhang Yi, the military commander Zhang Hanyu, and the liaison officer Qin Kun. Director Han felt a twitch in his heart and felt that the selection was quite good. At least in his opinion, this choice was a plus point, but the list was leaked, and Comrade Leo Wan was not happy. In addition to Li Bingbing, he was also pushing Huang Xiaoming. It was a pity that Xiaoming was never considered by Lyman. His selections were either top talents or popular with the audience, and also included well-known movie stars from Hong Kong and the mainland to join, fully taking care of the audience. It was not a blind selection. Director Han wanted to make some comments, but now that he saw that this list was extremely suitable, he didn't say anything, but agreed to bring the people. He still had a lot of faith. Although China Film did not train artists, which artist dared to ignore China Film? But for that scene, I found real troops to cooperate with. You said that the expansion of the scene still counts, right? Of course, but how many days can they shoot? It's about improving the image, so we have to shoot it in a month. Director Han muttered, and just nodded, that it would not interfere with anything, and he would have plenty of time. Here, the two sides talked about a section that showed the Chinese military strength, that is, the monster threat and the safety of Macau, and then the Chinese attacked with a patriotic color. Director Han attached great importance to it and contacted the superiors in advance. The superiors were also happy to create more in this kind of movie targeting Europe and the United States. As a result, the mobilization of many equipment and personnel became very convenient. For Lyman, the coastal cities involved in this film involved similar scenes in the countries and regions. Protecting the country and the people is what should be done. In this way, it can save money, and the scene is bigger and more macro. How can he not support it? It's really too much, and it's more important than assembly. Just after the discussion here, I returned to the room and the person in charge of Toho Film who had been contacted before also sent a message. Just like in the previous life, Toho itself had given up on developing Godzilla movies and was very satisfied with the proposal of investing in the image without taking the risk of production. Because no matter what, the more audience regions Godzilla faces, Toho Pictures will always benefit. It quickly agreed to Man Media's request, signed 10 image drama contracts, and tied up the warship. In a blink of an eye, Avatar broke 900 million yuan in the mainland, and while it was once again on the screen, Chinese actors also gathered at China Film. Among them, there was a man with a silly air, and he himself was quite puzzled. Look at Deng Chao and Liu Dehe, who is not a big name. How did he play with them? People are very confused, because his agency has never paid much attention to him, and some dramas are still found by his own connections. But since he is here, the notice was also sent by China Film, so it can't be fake. When he arrived at the reception room, he was polite in various ways, with lowered eyebrows and smiling faces, and he showed respect in his senses. While chatting, Director Han brought a foreigner in, and the reception room became quiet, and everyone knew that the sponsor had arrived. Lyman looked at his candidates, feeling very satisfied. He stopped and praised them a few times. They all look good, but they still need more training to maintain their military spirit. This aspect is left to your responsibility. Director Han smiled and said, they will be sent to the military camp next week and will adapt. Lyman looked at Zhang Yi again, feeling that he was more mature and less reckless than on the screen, and said to Director Han, the 3 pilots are the focus of training. At this point, although the news that Zhang Yi had inexplicably got the opportunity made a lot of male actors jealous in the circle, it could not change the result in the candidate. When Blake flew over from the United States, the matter here was handed over to him and Andrew, the person in charge of the site, to implement it, but Lemon set off to return to Los Angeles. In the past half month, the creators of Avatar had already finished the roadshow promotion, and the global box office had accumulated $1.97 billion. No one doubted that the record of Titanic would be broken, because everyone knew that it was only a matter of time. After a day of rest, when Lemon appeared in the company again, in addition to discussing the comic convention process of Avengers with Kevin, he also discussed his new play The Tuna. As for the actors, Heath Ledger joined with a salary of $10 million, and the others also signed schedules according to their roles and qualifications. The general cost of the actors was about $24 million. The set and props were also under the supervision of Ryan, and the progress was quite smooth. This year, Lemon hopes that the company's output performance can be raised to become the #1 studio in market share. This is his ambition. Chapter 961 Crew. Being idle and being busy are different, and the states of filming and daily work are also different. In the New Line studio, the buildings near the east side are being arranged and restored by the set design team of the Tuna according to the requirements of the script. In the room, the first thing that catches the eye is an elevated lighting lamp. It's not that natural light can't be used, but today's weather makes the light not strong enough, and it can't achieve the kind that the director wants. In broad daylight, a blind man witnessed a murder. The high sun and the disappearance of human life form a strong contrast. After all, this scene is the beginning of the whole story, and it is a section that makes the audience feel cold and deepen their sense of substitution. Haven't you filmed a play for their company? How do you feel? In another room outside the corridor, looking at the busy, but not chaotic setting scene, Felicity Huffman looked at Josh, who had gained a little weight for the role, and had a little belly. He's not too strict with actors, and he's very good at talking about plays, so it's pretty easy to act in his plays. Josh, whose career has been rejuvenated because of the role of the hunter in No Country for Old Men, said happily, "Really? That's reassuring. This is my first time acting in a play directed by such a big director." Felicity is also a representative of late bloomers among female stars. When she was young, she had made a lot of achievements in Broadway, but unfortunately, she was not successful after she had a way to get into Hollywood, and it can even be said that she failed. She only occasionally played some small supporting roles. Like many unknown actors, she often worried about the next performance opportunity. Later, she simply became a full-time housewife for the sake of her 2 children. However, fate made her want to be famous the most, but her persistence and hard work did not pay off. After she raised her children in her 40s, she became famous with Desperate Housewives and her career rose rapidly. In 2005, she won the Emmy Award for Best Actress in a Comedy Series. In 2006, she won multiple film festival awards for her outstanding performance in Crossing America, as well as the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress in a Drama, the Independent Spirit Award for Best Actress and the Oscar for Best Actress. She instantly became a rare representative of the powerful actress, and her star road was smooth. So the situation is really unpredictable. After 30 minutes, the crew started filming, and the actors stood in position, and a series of familiar things were done. This scene will use 2 close-up cameras to create a feeling of small space. When Thomas adjusted the camera angle and made an OK gesture, the lighting team also set up the light source under urging. There is no way. The lighting team is always the position that needs temporary changes the most. Sometimes they have to overturn and start over just because of the actor. Not to mention the lack of natural light outside and the need for a strong sense of light in the scene. This requires a lot of lighting design. When all these fine-tuning were completed, Heath Ledger sat in front of the piano with sunglasses, and next to him was Felicity, who was middle-aged but still charming. There were stains on the cuffs of her shirt, and her defensive expression was ready to show. Action. As the stage manager hit the board, Felicity asked tentatively, "Are you completely blind, or?" Although Heath Ledger was a little surprised and a little flustered at first, he soon calmed down and repeated the lie countless times. "When I was 14, I was hit on the head by a cricket ball and my optic nerve was damaged. I can no longer see anything." Two people. One is a housewife, but she is not willing to be boring, and has a relationship with the local sheriff, and even accidentally kills her husband after being caught. The other voluntarily gave up her eyes in order to maintain her concentration and practice piano skills, but gradually enjoyed the social preferential treatment of the blind, and was involved in a murder case after an accident occurred during a private performance invited by chance. This setting of both parties seems very dramatic. In other words, the highlight of the story of the tuner is that each character has undergone an unexpected transformation outside the framework. The housewife had an affair, but she never thought of killing her husband. As a result, on the wedding anniversary, the husband deliberately said that he was going out of town to give his wife a surprise, but actually invited a pianist and prepared red wine and flowers. The pianist was not blind, but he had to treat himself as a blind person. He did not have bad intentions in advance, but he encountered love, work and people's praise in the days when he lost his sight. Only then did he discover the benefits of a blind pianist. In later generations, in addition to the multiple reversal plot design, the identity definition of the characters alone was amazing. Coincidences and accidents change the life trajectory that the characters in the play should have planned. On the field, the two had a tacit understanding in the play. Whether it was verbal temptation or behavioral temptation, they handled it well. It was not until Josh joined and the three people confronted each other that Lemon shouted, "Cut," for the first time. After the crew stopped, Lemon came to the side of the three actors. "No, this part is not harmonious enough." "Harmonious? Isn't it tense?" Josh asked doubtfully. According to what is written in the script, in order to ease the hostess's probing offensive, the pianist took the initiative to ask to go to the bathroom, but unexpectedly the hostess followed him, and there was a man with a pistol hiding in the bathroom. This should be a very tense scene. Tension is the feedback presented to the audience. What I mean is that your standing positions cannot create a sense of space, and the degree of confrontation can be raised. According to your performance just now, Heath was helped in, and you stood in the corner of the bathroom. The three of you were not in a line, and the sense of conflict, when your eyes met, was a little weak. So let's try to shoot it like this later. He walks into pee. You stand on the right front side of the toilet, aim the pistol at his forehead appropriately, you help him in, then take a small step back, and land on the diagonal backside of the toilet, and then the two of you exchange eyes on how to deal with this sudden intrusion of trouble. Yes, no matter how much a person pretends to be blind, the first thought of a panicked person is still to silence him, which is how the subsequent scenes unfold. Get it? Lemon looked at the three of them, and they nodded in understanding. Show your best performance, and try to pass it in one go. Attention all departments, do it again. Lemon returned to the monitor and directed the positions. Soon, Felicity readjusted her expression, and stared coldly at Heath Ledger's every move. As for Heath Ledger, he smiled kindly, and kept repeating trouble. He was guided to move slowly, and then shushed without panic under the very interesting gaze. A voiceover will be added here, which is the sound of running water, to show the high level of disguise. After all, being stared at by someone, especially a man with a pistol, still requires a certain degree of calmness. Chapter 962 Follow the trend. Filming is actually quite boring and repetitive. When the film is finished, the smoother it is to watch, the more boring it is to shoot, especially for actors, because they are the execution link. If you have to say, the number of pauses in the middle of shooting a group of shots is enough to interrupt the emotions that the actors have worked hard to build up, so only those who can withstand this test can be considered to be able to adapt to this industry. Of course, if you figure out the role in advance and get into the play in advance, you can also make the structure of the role in your mind more three-dimensional, and the performance will be smoother. It is precisely because of this that movies are called the art of directing and acting. The crew of the tuner, with airy bangs and a plaid top with 9-point jeans, Dennings fully felt the difference between movies and TV series, so much so that she became the most diligent and the one with the most NGs among the main actors, and felt that she was holding everyone back. She stayed in the corner, put on light makeup, and took the time to read through the script. It's not that she was afraid of forgetting the lines. In fact, she rarely had to do NGs, because she forgot the lines, but because she couldn't keep up with the rhythm of the play. Every time she acted with Heath Ledger, she always made mistakes. Fortunately, Lyman was patient enough and allowed her to slowly get into the state. After all, strictly speaking, Catherine's acting career, including when she was in art school, did not exceed 5 years. The role that really helped her was not until Lyman discovered her and made her the heroine of the unit drama Loser Man, which was considered to be her entry into the threshold of an actor. Less than 2 years later, she took on her first big screen role in her life, which was inevitably immature. Her fingers gently turned a page, and the text before filming allowed her to better understand the daughter of the restaurant owner she played. Sometimes, asking the director about things she doesn't understand also makes her clearer about her role. She just entered the society at the age of 23 when her heart was stirring. One day, she accidentally hit a blind man on the roadside while riding a motorcycle. The blind man was a pianist, and the music he played was addictive. She asked him to come to her restaurant to play in the evening to compensate for it, and gave him all the tips she received. Because of the inconvenience of traveling, she took the initiative to take the blind pianist to and from work, became his full-time driver, and went further into his life. Then, the beauty was broken, and under the shell of music and art, there was a deceitful heart. Every time Dennings read this script and task, he felt more and more oppressive in life. If it was Josh, he would definitely say that this was a fateful interweaving. Just like his role, the sheriff who cheated and killed people is privately a henpecked man who is afraid of his wife. His image is a contrasting portrayal. Including this collaboration, he took on 2 plays of Lyman, both of which want to subvert the inherent impression of the appearance, so as to deeply portray the role. In No Country for Old Men, he was a hunter hunting antelopes, but ended up being hunted by Anton in the Steel Jungle. His status reversal was very clever. In The Tuna, he was a sheriff who was caught cheating and killed people directly, but he turned out to be seriously afraid of his wife and did not look like a ruthless person who could kill people. Lyman likes to let the audience build characters based on their appearances and then overturn such shells with their own hands to expose the inner heart of the characters. Josh thought so and glanced at Heath Ledger, who was still immersed in adapting to the life of a blind person not far away. In this crew, if you want to say who has paid the most, it is undoubtedly him. It is not easy to play a blind person like this, not to mention pretending to be blind. To be honest, I admire him very much. He can play the role of the Joker with extremely exposed emotions, and he can also play the role of wrapped emotions and wearing a hypocritical mask, which makes people want to compare. When the shooting progress of The Tuna was gradually accelerated, Avatar officially broke through the 2 billion mark and ran towards a farther direction. For a while, the industry was also undercurrents. On the surface, the media and the audience continued to praise it, but secretly, the studio executives all saw the money prospects of 3D plus IMAX. After all, the tickets sold by IMAX theaters alone for Avatar were as high as $200 million. In the conference room of the Disney Studios building, Robert Iger did not hide his intention to take advantage of the popularity of Avatar. But there were not many projects that were suitable for carrying 3D from the projects that had been filmed. After choosing and choosing, they set their sights on Alice in Wonderland. After understanding the leader's intentions, the people in the production department also fully understood the focus of the transformation work of the project. In the final analysis, the success of Avatar is the novelty. The audience has never seen this form of visual effects before. The head of the department looked at the analysis report piled in front of him, and the audience group and market distribution of Avatar told him this truth. But we can only convert it later. Alice in Wonderland has already been filmed. The film started shooting in September last year, and now, even the theater version is about to be released. Let's convert it. It's better than 2D. The head of the department thought about it. As for the sense of oppression, the opening numbers of Avatar are good. We can make more use of this technology. As for the integration of the environment, it may not be possible to achieve immersiveness. After all, it is a conversion, and its effect is definitely not as good as the initial foreshadowing execution. After Alice entered the Wonderland, the sunflowers, big mushrooms and other plants in the Wonderland looked like stiff stickers, which was not as natural and real as a Pandora planet. Will the audience hate this kind of following the trend? Someone worried? My opinion is the opposite. It is precisely because of the appearance of Avatar that the market for 3D visual effects has been opened up. The audience's demand for this aspect should be more urgent. Moreover, our story is different from that of Avatar, and it is not a replica. It is just that the effects should be close to make the audience's viewing experience more realistic. Yes, we are not a replica, but a different subject matter in the same market. Then we need to contact Weta Digital. Hey, you know what? The combination of Tim Burton plus Johnny Depp plus Helena Carter plus Anne Hathaway, the cast is at least more brilliant than that of Avatar. After exchanging opinions happily, Disney began to work on the transformation of Alice in Wonderland. On the other hand, Disney's marketing methods did not stop, and even called out 3D visual effects that were more immersive than Avatar, attracting many special effects fans. Of course, before the feature film was released, everyone's discussion was skeptical. Avatar is such a great film, how can you say it is better than the previous one? Where do you get the confidence to say it is better? Chapter 963 Hot. Columbia and Firefly will push Avatar to win 2 awards? Columbia executives commented, Avatar has done what 99.9% of the world's movies cannot do. It has broadened the entire market and pointed out the future direction of filming. Why can't it win an Oscar again? This is not surprising. Science fiction movies are the embodiment of imagination, and imagination is the source of film progress. In other words, it is time for the Oscars to take science fiction seriously. Lyman, who was obsessed with filming, had to leave the crew and take a short vacation because of the arrival of the 82nd Academy Awards season. First of all, on February 2nd, the organizing committee announced the list of nominees. Among them, although Avatar did not win any actor awards, it did not miss the technical award in the final 2 awards, Best Director and Best Picture. Taking advantage of this topic, Columbia and Blue Butterfly obviously did not miss this opportunity to hype up the film. The new round of marketing and public relations revolved around whether Avatar would win the double awards, which quickly attracted the attention of audiences and fans, and even became a hot topic of discussion among judging agencies, selectors and even other public relations companies. And every audience who has watched Avatar also hopes that the movies they have watched and liked can become miracle makers. It's like Titanic back then. It ranked first in film history and won a big award. This is reasonable, isn't it? The box office is so high, and it's still rising. Who else can have such persuasiveness except for it? Haha, Avatar didn't have a single actor nomination. It feels like the organizing committee is satirizing the fact that the main characters of this movie are performing with masks. No, it can't be called performances at all. They are the product of CG fusion. But I have to say that, although I feel that Up in the Air and The Hurt Locker are both good movies, these masterpieces were unlucky to collide with Avatar, and their influence is completely not on the same level. Am I the only one who cares that Catherine, the director of The Hurt Locker, is Cameron's ex-wife? It's quite interesting for these two people to compete together. I really want to see Cameron's expression when he attends the dinner. In fact, the popularity of discussions on Yahoo is only one aspect of the film's influence. Prediction agencies are also celebrating the coronation of Avatar in advance. As Lyman said on the phone, in the face of absolute strength, it is the popular choice. But Lyman is not so optimistic. It is a common thing for Oscars to be a hot favorite. Those old antiques seem to want to use this method to express their unique and unconventional review and highlight their professionalism. After all, Saving Private Ryan was also lost in the same way. It was the popular choice before the selection. After the selection, the audience was angry and cursed, but it could not change the established facts. It's just that it's impossible to lower the popularity of Avatar. It is now only one step away from surpassing Titanic to become the first in film history. Movie fans and studios all over the world are watching it, and it has been hanging high on Yahoo's hot search list, updating the box office in real time. In Columbia's office, when Lyman mentioned this, the distribution president Gareth quickly understood Lyman's intention, but he quickly said, "Don't worry, man. Even if we don't win, what does it matter? The box office of Avatar has exceeded our expectations. Even if it wins a big award, it will only be another round of hype, but it now has enough attention. With the profit margin approaching the upper limit, the more you invest, the lower the rate of return. But you are saying this from the perspective of return on investment. Have you considered the feelings of the crew's main creators? Would they like us to actively publicize them to win awards and enrich their resumes? No. Do you think Cameron attaches great importance to the Oscar? In fact, after the nominations were announced, he didn't even call me. I called him first, and then he said he wanted to be quiet for a while, and hung up directly. As for those technical awards, they are dispensable. You mean, we won't compete for it? Fight. Why not? It's just that our two companies don't need to put too much effort in public relations. You see, we just mentioned the double award, and it caused a discussion. That's enough. Gareth looked very comfortable. The fact is that Columbia is the second largest beneficiary of the success of Avatar, so they have become closer to Lyman recently. Now that a deal has been made, we all have to look forward. Gareth was still cheerful. Yes, you are right. Lyman agreed. This cooperation could bring Columbia hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Does that mean he can find out more about their intentions while they are close? Lyman did not hesitate and asked, well, Gareth, what are your thoughts on Spider-Man? This? Gareth suddenly had a headache. Why are we talking about this again? It's really hard to deal with. Are there any concerns? Maybe we can solve them. Do we need to sit down and talk about many things? Forget it. I'll just say it straight. Lyman, you know that Spider-Man is already a very successful IP project of our company, and I'm in charge of distribution, not responsible for project establishment and production. Do you understand what I mean? Such a large project involves many aspects, and it is not something that one person can decide. I understand, but are there people who are interested in cooperating? Of course there are. You may underestimate your own production ability, but our advantages are not bad, and many people also prefer independent development. I mean, what should I do to impress those who are hesitant? That's difficult. Lyman, will you give up the copyright of Avatar or the Marvel project? Lyman thought for a while. The relationship between the two is somewhat different. I know that Spider-Man's development seems to have reached a deadlock. I'm sure you will understand how great the risks of restarting are. Risks often represent benefits. Gareth was very busy, and Lyman was also very busy. After talking to this point, knowing that Columbia still had no intention of changing, he took the initiative to say goodbye and left. In any case, Columbia was confident, before they ran into a wall, which was the premise for sitting at the negotiation table, that Lyman could not solve. During this period, the Oscar trend was always in favor of Avatar, and even some rigid film critics had to admit the charm of Avatar, not in telling the story, but in finding a new shooting direction, an innovation that could capture the hearts of the audience when they went to the theater to watch the movie. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 964 Pareto Principle. The next morning, Lyman was still lying in bed, not wanting to get up. Eva went to try on her costumes early in the morning, and he was the only one left in the manor except the housekeeper. Moreover, he had been in a fast-paced state for the past 2 weeks for filming, and laziness quickly took over his body. But at 3 p.m., he still had to rush to the Oscar dinner. Under the usual arrangement of the organizing committee, Lyman met Cameron, who had not appeared after the road show. I thought you wouldn't come. Lyman joked. I know what you want to say, but she and I have a good relationship. We are not enemies, we just can't get along. Cameron still had a very calm face, but soon he broke down. In the interview area, the reporters didn't care about what Avatar would be like, and all focused on his private parts. Do you still love her? Have you met her? How do you feel now, seeing her nominated for Best Director, and competing with you? The media were extremely excited, and kept asking questions. Cameron thought he was mentally prepared, and was going to give his best wishes, but when he encountered this, his face still fell. He didn't answer a word, and walked away from the reporters on his own, followed by Lyman who wanted to laugh but couldn't. He could imagine what the headline of tomorrow's report would be: Catherine, the woman who made Cameron sigh. However, putting aside the sigh or not, Cameron and Catherine do have a very good relationship. When the two met in the hall, they hugged each other in a friendly manner. Of course, the result was doomed. Avatar is too popular, and some old antiques in the organizing committee naturally don't like movies with excellent box office to win the Oscar. When watching Catherine go on stage to receive the award, Lyman found that Cameron was applauding sincerely below, without a trace of curse at all. Yes, for directors like them, the Oscar is not a gilded award. Although the audience watching the live broadcast in front of the TV was surprised, the Hurt Locker caters to the recent mainstream anti-war trend, calling on the president to withdraw troops from Iraq. Plus it is a positive propaganda for the army, and the story is well shot, so it's nothing to give it this award. Lyman understood it this way. The 82nd Oscar Awards has been very political, but Lyman explained from another perspective why the public relations team was also a little surprised. Boss, don't you know? Summit Entertainment, the producer of The Hurt Locker, didn't spend any money on public relations, and even made a joke of male canvassing. They didn't even want to spend money on banquets. To put it bluntly, in a business like the Oscars, you don't even invest in admission fees. How can those old antiques like it? But its biggest advantage is that it caters to the political trend, and there are too many old-fashioned white men on the jury. You know what I mean. That's not enough. I feel that our project has paved the way for orthodox movies like The Hurt Locker. Liam replied. Although it's just a guess, it can actually be analyzed. But, you just said that Summit Entertainment is short of money. Is there a problem with their capital chain? They are a small company that started out as a consignment sales agent. Last year was not a good year. How could they have an easy life? Boss, this is the sadness of small companies, just like Lyman Films back then. Seeing that his boss was interested in Summit Entertainment, Lyman said a few more words. Lyman also gradually discovered that in the timeline influenced by him, not only did Lionsgate's business not make much progress, but Summit Entertainment, a studio that was eventually acquired by Lionsgate, by digging out the Twilight series, had a very tight cash flow. In the more than a year of reconstruction after the stock market crash, their performance output has dropped significantly. Even if they really want The Hurt Locker to try to win awards and make money, they can't spare the extra funds for public relations. For example, the leading actor Jeremy Renner, the actor of Hawkeye, had to pay out of his own pocket to attend several film critics' cocktail parties. This should have been paid for by the producer, and even the hotel pickup and drop-off should have been arranged. Moreover, even if The Hurt Locker won the award, the improvement for the actors would not be as great as the improvement for director Catherine, but Jeremy did it. This guy has a good personality and doesn't care much. He is a more Buddhist person. Hawkeye's temperament is very suitable for him, and he won't compete for the status. There are so many characters in a movie, and there are always people who are set off and sacrificed. Is that so? Then collect a detailed information about Summit Entertainment and send it to me in a few days. Boss, are you interested in Summit Entertainment? But to be honest, this studio is not worth much. The favorable assets are wrapped in debts, and it is troublesome to acquire it. Their most valuable film library copyrights are not valuable either. Do you know Netflix? Huh. It's not Liam's fault that he doesn't understand. In fact, Summit Entertainment has not achieved any results. At this time, most of the film industry follows a theory, the 80/20 rule. Hot selling projects create 80% of the studio's performance. In contrast, 80% of mediocre works can only contribute 20% of the output, and often cannot make back the cost, becoming unprofitable inventory copyrights. The reason why Firefly rose so fast is that the 80/20 rule does not apply to it. It makes more profits and loses less, so its cash flow naturally grows bigger and bigger, and its assets grow more and more. However, the emergence and progress of the internet has changed the status quo of the film industry, but it is not obvious at this time. Many people have seen the rise of Netflix and the efforts of their independent creative projects, but they have ignored what the copyrights of old and bad movies have brought to Netflix. One interesting thing about Netflix's performance report is that 80% of the squeezed inventory has come into their hands, and it has the same market as the 20% of the best-selling masterpieces. Because of their push and broadcast system, the attention cost of a project has dropped sharply. Simply put, it is not what the audience wants to watch, but how Netflix makes the audience watch what. In the era of big data, it can easily find out the viewing preferences of an audience and constantly push similar movies to him. This is why the Sharknado series can be filmed to the 6th part, because such bad movies will also be watched by people. In other words, if it is a DVD release, the cost of delivery must be considered, and worthless copies are also a waste. However, in Netflix's system, even the most unpopular movies cannot withstand searches and clicks. This is traffic. Lyman has always thought about streaming media, but the timing is not right, so he has never tried it. But think about it, it will definitely not hurt to plan ahead and save more film and television copyrights. If you can't create the expected income at this time, don't you still have a future? Why did Sony take over MGM's film library? Because they want to become the leader in the home audiovisual market, so they are now the #1 in market share. The time period when Netflix took off was also the time when they broke up peacefully with Disney and switched to investment and production. A very simple truth is that when you are a channel platform, the thickness of film and television copyrights covers the lower limit of the platform, and the right to speak determines the upper limit of the platform's development. At this moment, Lyman wants to keep the basic market first. Chapter 965 Basic Plate. When it comes to the basics, we need to understand what Netflix's business model is like. According to Netflix's latest quarterly revenue, the bulk of their revenue still comes mainly from video rentals, which means that Netflix's main revenue source, monthly payments from users, have not yet developed. However, according to the trend that has already emerged at this time, Netflix's business model for users, that is, paying a fixed monthly membership fee in exchange for unlimited browsing of video content on the Netflix website, is increasing year by year. However, this model has always had a disadvantage. When the existing content of the streaming website cannot attract users, the number of monthly payments by users will drop rapidly. Tudao and Yauku in the mainland have made a good explanation. That is, the market share of streaming media is not static and deeply rooted. Of course, Netflix is still cultivating paying users, which means that the video content on Netflix's website is very attractive relative to its payment cost, and the audience is willing to spend this money to enjoy it. Otherwise the proportion will not increase year by year. A little more carefully, it means that Netflix's increased users are snatched from other entertainment markets, and their core competitiveness is copyright. In the past, when movies were released from theaters, they entered the DVD market or TV stations. The emergence of Netflix has given moviegoers an additional choice, video websites, and more convenient mobile phone playback in the future. Analyzing from the consumption behavior of users, the user profile that Netflix faces should be users who like to watch video images in exchange for spiritual pleasure. From this perspective, Netflix's potential user groups should include users who like video discs, users in Netflix's original market segments, users who like TV series, TV users, users who like online videos, competitors in the same field such as YouTube, users who like movies, and so on. In other words, at this moment, the media tycoons have not clearly noticed Netflix's plunder of users in other image consumption markets, because Netflix's development is based on the premise that TV users transfer viewing channels. Whether the choice of broadcast content can constitute a competitive advantage over competitors is the foundation of Netflix. Because watching movies in theaters or on TV is somewhat random and cannot take care of all audiences, Netflix is different, where you can completely search for the type you like, which can be said to be tailor-made. In other words, the core of Netflix's future competition lies in whether it can provide users with a higher cost-effectiveness of image consumption, that is, for the same spiritual pleasure, Netflix's cost is lower. Or for the same consumption cost, Netflix's products have a higher spiritual pleasure. From the future perspective, Netflix has succeeded. They have become the king of the global streaming media field. The slogan "Netflix products must be high quality" has been talked about by fans. This was the signboard of HBO in the past. In this, Netflix's means of overtaking on the curve and breaking the existing pattern is called disruptive innovation. The word destruction is not a derogatory word in this context. What was the film and television industry like before? The model has long been determined, and the development of many projects is very complete and industrial. Even in the process of perfection, a flying giants such as Blockbuster were born, so that the store bullied customers, in turn squeezed the interests of the studios, demanded exclusive authorization, and increased channel service fees. In the 1990s, many small studios hated Blockbuster, and it was under such demand that Netflix came into being. However, it is naturally very difficult for a new industry to challenge only head-on. Whether it is competing in financial resources, material resources or investment resources, what can Netflix do to compete with Blockbuster? Therefore, Netflix bypassed the difficulty of insufficient offline stores through innovative online ordering and DVD delivery models, and began to develop from an unexpected angle. In layman's terms, Netflix is the Apple of the mobile phone market, and Blockbuster is the Nokia that was once in its heyday. The current situation of the two actually corresponds to the future market. After all, Blockbuster is just a rental middleman, but Netflix has seized not only the rental market, but also the trend of world development. At the beginning, did Blockbuster take Netflix seriously? Not at all. It naively thought that its opponents were only those difficult content suppliers or overseas ambitious people like Sony. But it didn't expect that it would be the first to fall. In early 2010, Blockbuster once again announced the closure of 90 stores in overseas regions, reducing operating costs, but still having difficulty in revenue, and it is likely to not survive this year. Did the CEO of Blockbuster do something wrong? No, although everyone complains about its poor service. The problem is that it controls enough resources, but they just lost to the newcomers in the industry. The so-called disruptive innovation is precisely because the existing forces do not need to do anything wrong, but will be eliminated if they fail to keep up with the pace. This is the case with Nokia and Blockbuster. They were all doing well in their own fields, but suddenly they were hit by a dimensionality reduction. As long as the audience base is large enough, those non-mainstream and low-demand movie copyrights can also create revenue similar to those of hot-selling blockbusters. On the phone, Lyman, who returned to the crew to continue filming, took the time to answer Joseph's doubts. For example, Twilight sold very well. Even if it was licensed to Netflix for on-demand viewing, it could generate hundreds of thousands of profits a month. However, the on-demand profits of more than 100 unpopular and bad movies are also hundreds of thousands a month. The strength of streaming media like Netflix is that it can sell products that cannot be distributed offline at a better price. In other words, they are more precise than the existing model and can improve the turnover rate of resources. Of course, judging from the financial report, the money they make from paying users is not enough to pay for the licensed movies. But after all, their fee group is less than 2 million. What if it is 20 million, 40 million, or 100 million? They will definitely make money. In 2010, Netflix's copyright library had a total of more than 3,200 movies. Every year, they have to pay tens of millions of licensing fees to content suppliers such as Firefly, Fox and other studios for these, not including the profit sharing after on-demand viewing. Their number of users obviously cannot meet the cost of the film library, but this is just an inevitable period of pain. Netflix's distribution model has always been able to accumulate small amounts into large amounts. If it were a Blockbuster store, there would only be more than 1,000 movies on the shelves, and the cost was high, so it needed to pressure the studios in disguise to expand its revenue. Netflix, on the other hand, is like Meituan's food delivery business. It spends money in the early stages to occupy the market, and when the base is large enough to meet demand, the snowball will only roll faster and faster, and the proportion of pure content costs will continue to decrease until it achieves absolute hegemony over the entire video market. Of course, the latter is still difficult, and it is still very difficult for one company to dominate the streaming media market. So, Lyman also wants to learn from Disney and become independent. Don't forget that he has Marvel, which Disney doesn't have. Chapter 966 Film Library. March 9th, the day after the Oscars. During lunchtime for the crew of The Piano Tuner, Dennings sat on a soft chair eating macaroni while looking at the director not far away. For Lyman, The crew did not have any difficulty adapting to the progress after he returned to host the show, and everyone was in good shape. And because the piano tuner has simple scenes and few characters, and does not involve special effects shots, it is easier to shoot than ordinary movies. Dim the lights. Too bright doesn't fit the atmosphere of this scene. Also, set up a slide rail next to the table. I need a camera that pushes in. Lyman directed the crew and told them the effect he wanted. On the other side, Ryan was also arranging several temporary actors to walk through the scene. Remember, you will walk around in this area in a while. Don't look at the position of the camera. Just be natural. Director, the actors have changed into their costumes. Yes. Lyman nodded slightly. Remember to report to the local traffic department about the road closure for our next scene. It will take about 2 hours. Remember to communicate well. After giving the instructions, Lyman picked up the megaphone and shouted, "Start in 5 minutes." 5 minutes later, with the crisp sound of the board, the scene suddenly fell into the arrangement that should be made. The radio microphone was held diagonally above Heath Ledger, and a camera next to it slowly moved closer, forming a group of short and smooth shots. On the road outside the house, the pianist in a grey suit took off his sunglasses angrily, and then became decadent again, and then put on an indifferent face. The camera is facing his face, and a simple panning shot follows the actor's expression changes to give the audience a metaphor of seeing through the character. The scene that will happen is the cold attitude of the restaurant owner's daughter after she notes that the pianist is not blind. At that time, it will be accompanied by the sound of the car engine, symbolizing the rupture of the relationship between the two and the emotional foreshadowing of the final reversal. This is also a common sound and picture trick in movies. After shooting, keep one take and then switch scenes. It was not until the end of the whole day's shooting that Lyman saw a document about the asset distribution and acquisition evaluation of Summit Entertainment in his mailbox. Summit Entertainment is a medium-sized studio located in Santa Monica, California, founded in 1993, covering multiple fields of the film and television industry. If you have to say that Lyman took the lead in developing the Twilight series and has any independent production achievements, it may only be Step Up, a song and dance series with a relatively stable return rate. Moreover, the studio's operational energy does not seem to be focused on independent production. Their annual production volume is extremely low, and sometimes no more than 5 films, usually only 1 or 2. It can be said that they are very conservative and cautious. So far, they have not invested in a project exceeding $40 million. They are completely focused on the international film festival route or low-cost entertainment films with low audit risks. However, when it comes to agency sales and offline sales in the international market, they still have some foundation. After all, this company was founded to run the international market. It can be called a smaller version of Miramax, except that Miramax prefers to compete for the Oscars or dig out films from other regions to be screened in the US market, while Summit Entertainment digs out local films and operates them in overseas regions. Everyone knows that the number of films that can be screened in theaters each year in the film industry is not large. Compared with the huge production market, many filmmakers need a window for realization. For example, a new director took great pains to find funds and crews and successfully made a movie, but because of the quality or connections, the theaters were unwilling to spend resources to promote it. If the DVD was released, it would face insufficient channels and blockbuster cheating customers, which also made it difficult to generate profits. It was under this demand that Summit Entertainment, like many studios engaged in agency sales, grasped this part of the demand market and provided services. You give it the movies that cannot be shown in theaters, and it will help you operate them in the film markets in the UK, Germany and other places. Then, the profits from the operation will be settled according to the pre-signed agreement, or by buyout or split account mode. Of course, this settlement process may be very slow, and you may not get the money all at once, but at least it provides a channel for many works. In later generations, the advanced version of this model is called online movies. As for the quality, everyone knows there is a reason why it cannot be shown in theaters. Looking through these contents, Lyman had to say that sometimes alternative opportunities can also take off. Compared with the beginning of its establishment, the current Summit Entertainment assets have expanded at least dozens of times. It has also set up an office in the UK and gradually explored its own distribution and production system. However, due to the limited capital chain, the output is too small, and it has not yet made a blockbuster like Twilight. But looking at this year's production of The Hurt Locker, it is still much better than the average studio. In other words, the company itself is still on the right track of development, and the projects it operates are becoming more and more high-end and more three-dimensional. No wonder it will be bound by Lionsgate in the stock plus cash model in the future. Yes, unlike Warner's attitude towards New Line, Summit Entertainment's management has a very independent voice after entering the Lionsgate system, and it also retains the distribution label. It's a pity that, because of the stock market crash, the situation that Summit Entertainment has finally developed is suddenly a little pessimistic. If they can't find a black horse project that can make a lot of money, they are likely to be dragged down by debt. After all, the advantage of agency sales is that it is low risk and stable, but the profit output is just so-so, and it cannot support the gradually expanding operational burden. According to the evaluation of professionals found by Lyman, Summit Entertainment currently has only $450 million assets in addition to a part of the bank's loan, and the majority of it is concentrated in more than 1,000 movies in the film library and several audiovisual copy factories in overseas regions. Moreover, due to poor management and bad seasons, the capital turnover has turned from a small problem to a big burden, which can be very good at lowering prices. After reading this part of the information, Lyman began to think about how to hold this most core part. Speaking of it, Firefly has only accumulated more than 200 film and television copyrights since its development, even if it has taken the Cannes Film Festival. However, most of Summit Entertainment's films are bad and go in volume, while Firefly has many excellent works, or art films, and the overall development value is better. But if it is a streaming media, the quantity cannot be low under the premise of ensuring quality. At least in terms of content coverage, it has always been the basis of a playback platform. When Lyman got his thoughts back, he called Johnson and said, "I hope CAA can help me contact a production studio." Well, I want Summit Entertainment's film library. Chapter 967, Lionsgate Without a Future. Contact with Summit Entertainment is still going on, but as previously investigated, they are facing a financial crisis and their attitude is not very firm. At least for the bottom level employees, they can't pay full salaries, and they don't want to have incentive bonuses. Although there are union constraints, capitalists have to abide by many policies and laws on employee benefits, and protect their rights and interests, but in fact, the union is also a partner of the studio to a certain extent. No union would want a fairly powerful studio to collapse. The big guys are arguing every day. Some people don't want to play anymore, but no one inside is willing to eat it. Some people curse and complain that the stalls are too open and too fast, which greatly increases operating costs and affects the business that was originally profitable. Once such a thing happens, the employees' enthusiasm is gone. Even if The Hurt Locker won the Oscar, it actually has a lot of operating capital. As long as the slogan of the Oscar is played, it can attract some audiences to actively go to the theater. But if the money earned cannot make up for the gap, it means nothing. Obviously, an art film can't do this. It can't be Avatar or The Dark Knight. They put forward a lot of conditions. In The Crew of the Tuna, Johnson rushed over to report, retain the label, hold certain powers, and more specifics are all on this. Lyman took over the negotiation results after the initial contact and frowned. He suddenly realized that the demands of investors and management were completely different. The former was just for money and wanted to sell Summit Entertainment at a good price. The latter also held shares, but what they wanted was the freedom of speech. It would be best if it became a sublabel of Man Media and enjoyed similar treatment as Firefly and Marvel. In other words, this was a big deviation from Lyman's idea. He had never thought of accepting so many people. If Summit Entertainment entered, by retaining the distribution label, it would inevitably have a certain impact on the existing personnel structure, which would also be troublesome. Is there any possibility of further discussion? Keeping the label is not in my plan. of course, but Johnson talked about another thing. When we contacted Summit Entertainment, we found that there were other companies that were eyeing it. Who? Lionsgate, as the first independent company to break the existing pattern and establish itself overseas. Lionsgate, which was praised by Variety as the 8th label and led the release of several projects with a total value of over $1 billion at the end of last year, is now in a lot of trouble. They are ambitiously planning overseas and have successively acquired several production studios to resplit and integrate all labels to improve the distribution and production efficiency, hoping to gain a firm foothold. But unfortunately, they have gained a firm foothold, but not by themselves. In terms of content, they rely too much on the cooperation projects of Firefly, which leads to overseas channel dealers not buying Lionsgate's account. The fundamental reason is that they have almost no achievements that can be proved in terms of independent output. Again, if you don't have reliable interests that convince people, why would others be willing to spend money and effort? But the business has already been set up. To get returns from project operations, they can only choose to improve the competitiveness of content, especially when Man Media began to develop overseas markets. The resources of the two companies overlapped a lot, and they couldn't play the differentiation card, so they had to rely on themselves. From this perspective, Lionsgate's situation is indeed not good, and it is eager to change, otherwise it will be very embarrassing. There is a rumor circulating in the industry now that Lionsgate plans to invest heavily in building a new production system. It is very likely that they want to integrate strong foreign aid like Paramount did in 2005. Johnson said, maybe they have also discovered that relying solely on the original production team, at most they can produce the sister series or some horror, thriller and other types of film projects. They have been playing this set for many years and have rich experience and rarely lose money, but the problem is that they can't impress overseas audiences with these themes with a small audience. Lionsgate's management is capable and financially secure, so why is the output so single? In fact, it's very simple. In the film industry, everyone will instinctively choose the works with the highest success rate. For example, Universal's comedy production is higher than that of the other studios. Compared with Lionsgate, they are used to thriller and horror genres and are more biased than Universal. This subconscious cultivation has led to many studios having similar resource inclinations. Look at Disney. No matter how much it develops live-action movies, it often has a low-age style and family-friendly production experience. That's true. After the audience has a fixed impression, isn't it also restricting the studio's changes? Lionsgate doesn't play thriller and horror themes. Who will buy it? No wonder they need to introduce foreign aid. But the question is, why Summit Entertainment? Lyman thought about it and asked, what do they want from Summit Entertainment? The type of film that Summit Entertainment is best at is themes for teenagers. Sir, don't be confused by their The Hurt Locker. The focus of this studio is similar to the Twilight series you developed. Their representative works such as Las Vegas and Step Up are all aimed at the youth market. In other words, Lionsgate is sure that the youth theme will have a role in the future film market. Lyman concluded. Who knows, Hollywood will change in a few years. The most popular magic epics in the past, aren't the audiences now tired of it? Lyman stopped talking. If I'm not wrong, Lionsgate has entered the top 3 for the first time by relying on youth themes, completing a feat that most studios have not achieved. At that time, Lionsgate, which held the copyrights of The Hunger Games and Twilight, was in great glory. However, Lyman had already grasped the adaptation rights of The Hunger Games. The book was published in January 2010, and Lyman, who had always paid attention to it, had already obtained it before the sales volume became famous. It only cost $10 million to reserve the priority of adaptation of the first and future films. So, Lionsgate also wants to compete with us for the copyright in the film library? It seems so. They are in urgent need of content, and if it is Lionsgate, they may agree to the conditions of retaining the label. It's bad. Lionsgate and Summit Entertainment have a greater chance of winning if they reach an agreement. But from another perspective, why can't the two companies split Summit Entertainment? Lionsgate certainly doesn't want the copyright that has no monetization value. Yes, let's do it. Lyman made a few remarks to Johnson. Chapter 968. The tuna wraps up. Hollywood is a big melting pot, leaky, full of people, gossipy, and hard to keep secrets. Therefore, the fact that Summit Entertainment was approached by Lionsgate and Firefly soon became a topic of discussion among the staff of various companies in their spare time. What is more curious is, what is it about Summit Entertainment that attracted the two companies? But if you spend some time investigating, Summit Entertainment's assets are really useless to companies such as Disney and Fox. For a while, everyone just watched the show and watched how the two companies, who used to have close cooperation, fought. However, what disappointed the audience with different thoughts was that when they found out that there was a competitor, both Lionsgate and Firefly maintained considerable restraint, which also made the investors of Summit Entertainment feel that such a price increase method was a bit embarrassing. It can even be said that Lyman seemed to be indifferent and focused on the finishing work of the tuna. The second weekend of March, the layout of the last scene was ready between the vegetable fields beside a path. It was morning and the weather was good. The camera on the crane arm faithfully recorded a farmer shooting a blind hare with a hunting rifle. The gun went off, and a car drove over from the other end of the road. This is actually the opening scene of the film, but it was left to the end because it buried a clue for the final reversal, just like Nolan's secret design in Memento, a surprise reversal. Another reason is that the crew spent more than a month to cultivate the temporary vegetable field in front of them. Yes, this was originally a wasteland, but considering the limitations of the scene, the crew had to cultivate a vegetable field to meet the needs. This has happened in many movies. When this set of shots was completed, the 7-week filming work was over. Wow. The scene was quiet for a few seconds, and Ryan took the lead in applauding. Done. Call it a day, see you at the party tonight. Lyman, who was sitting behind the monitor, also laughed. 7 o'clock in the evening, on time. Not far away. Heath Ledger looked at the lively scene and slowly got out of the character's emotions. It was finished. After the break, the crew members who had been holding back for a long time showed their interest, and alcohol became the theme of the night. For those who don't drink, the atmosphere will not be bad. At least there are delicious food to accompany them. At the reminder of her agent, Dennings quickly found Lyman, who was chatting with Heath Ledger with a glass of champagne. Director, thank you for letting me audition this time. The girl toasted a glass of wine and hugged him. Compared to acting in movies and TV series, how do you feel? Lyman asked with a smile. That's it. How should I put it? The big screen is more challenging than the small screen. I think so myself. It's very enjoyable to act. Haha, let's continue to cooperate, if there is a chance. Okay. The girl said happily. Seeing her making friends with other crew members again, Lyman felt that Dennings was still very suitable for the path of an actor. She has good looks, is not extreme, is willing to work hard, and has good acting talent. However, that night, the completion of the piano tuna was not the focus of the industry, because in the film market, Alice in Wonderland, which is said to have a more realistic three-dimensional sense, has already got a very good box office start, which has encouraged the studios to explore the market for 3D shooting. The film won $41 million on the box office on its premiere. On Friday, ranking 11th in the opening day box office in film history and 7th in the Friday box office in history, second only to The Twilight Saga, New Moon, Batman, The Dark Knight, Spider-Man 3, Pirates of the Caribbean 2, Dead Man's Chest, X-Men 3, The Last Stand, and Pirates of the Caribbean, at World's End Avatar was released on Wednesday. Then Alice continued to gain momentum, earning $44.33 million on Saturday and $30.98 million on Sunday. The North American screening figures for the first weekend directly won $116 million, becoming the second highest opening box office of G-rated and PG-rated movies in history, second only to Shrek the Third, and surpassing Cars to rank first in the opening box office of spring openings in history, and surpassing 300 to rank first in the opening box office of March openings in history. In addition, this film is the 9th fastest North American box office to break $100 million in history. Of course, with such a hot North American market, the global market will not be much worse. The total accumulated $210 million in 3 days easily became the new box office champion of this year's movies. Avatar was considered last year's movie. Not to mention, in order to catch the heat, Disney chose to screen it in March in a hurry, and also got a rare high average of about $31,200 per theater, which almost overturned the previous second holder of the single theater average record, The Dark Knight. For a time, the golden combination of Tim Burton and Johnny Depp became the focus of the audience, and also raised the global performance of the first week of the previous hit Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by more than 2 times. In addition, this is the second highest opening box office of Depp and the highest opening box office of Hathaway starring works, and of course it also rewrote the highest opening record of Burton's works. Obviously, Disney did a very successful job in this marketing. First, it was benchmarked against Avatar, which attracted the audience's attention while being questioned. Then Depp won the People's Choice Lifetime Achievement Award and exhibited at a sky-high price in the Super Bowl. The continuous hype of soft and hard advertising maintained a very high exposure rate. Not to mention that after the market exploded in the first week, it also maintained a slight decline in the second week, less than 40%. This means that the film has a certain long-term operating potential. From this point of view, the significance of Alice's big sales needs to be taken more seriously by the industry. The examples of Avatar and Alice clearly tell everyone that, if the 3D is good, the audience is willing to spend money, because the IMAX theaters of the film are basically full. Of course, there are winners and losers. During the schedule, Overture Pictures, which once relied on law-abiding citizen to change the fate of the company, this week generously took out Brooklyn Cop, which spent $5 million to obtain the distribution rights, intending to grab the male and realistic audiences to the maximum extent. As a result, the performance of $13.5 million in the first week was much lower than the $20 million opening level expected by Overture. Although Brooklyn Cop also ran expensive ads during the Super Bowl, it was completely bullied by its rival. The premiere figures differed by $100 million. On the contrary, the more money was spent on publicity, the more difficult it was to recoup the investment. The industry had to sigh. None of the 3D works that faced off head-on could gain any benefits. Back at the company, Lyman saw that the word of mouth was obviously not as good as the market evaluation of Avatar. Lyman also said with a smile, "The first follower always gets a share of the spoils." Chapter 969. Continue to spend money. Unconsciously, 2 weeks have passed since Lionsgate and Firefly sent people to negotiate. During this period, The Tuna was completed, and Alice in Wonderland was a big hit in the film market. Disney was happy and immediately held a press conference to announce the establishment of the sequel. But during the days of waiting without any movement, the shareholders of Summit Entertainment could not sit still. Perhaps they felt that the other party was so procrastinating and did not attach much importance to the so-called acquisition. After all, the value of Summit's assets has not been very favorable. But in fact, after The Tuna was completed, even if Lyman devoted most of his energy to editing, he was also remotely directing the expansion of the film library. Although he was not in a hurry to promote Summit Entertainment, he spent a lot of money. He had bought a lot of old film copyrights from several studios in the UK and Germany. The number of film sources has increased to more than 800, and the payment for this was more than $87 million. In addition, it was a matter of communicating with Lionsgate and reaching a tacit understanding in advance. It's not that the two companies didn't see the value of Summit Entertainment, but they didn't want to compete with each other and be overpriced. On March 22nd, around noon, Lyman and Ryan, dressed in formal attire, came to an Italian restaurant and waited for Lionsgate boss Gustavo to arrive in a private room. "Lyman, will they agree to our terms? Actually, if we raise the price, Summit Entertainment will not object to the transfer of the film library," Ryan asked. "There's no need to give others a bargain. But now we also need to develop overseas markets ourselves. As for Lionsgate," Lyman raised his hand to interrupt Ryan. He knew what his good friend wanted to say and replied with some emotion, "Business is business. We can't just stop developing overseas channels because they used to be friendly competitors. Besides, we are all in the same circle and competition is inevitable." This is just a common thing, and we can't just do it on impulse. Then why should we do this? They are enemies, not friends. If we don't do this face-saving work, we can just bid directly to compete, and the copyrights of the film libraries don't need to be divided. Lemon shook his head and said softly, that's not the case. Lionsgate has developed to this day, and is a force that cannot be ignored among manufacturers. In today's Hollywood, except for the Big Five and the animation overlord Disney, they have more experience and more channels than us in terms of distribution and promotion. What's more, in this world, can we tell friends from enemies? Today's opponent may be tomorrow's friendly business. We may have a falling out over interests today, even if we were close partners yesterday. So, we should always leave room for everything. Is Summit Entertainment a big deal? No, our goal is to hoard copyrights, and our goal with Lionsgate is just a small conflict. Even if we suffer a little loss, we can maintain our friendship and show Lionsgate our attitude. Maybe we will have the opportunity to cooperate in the future. After coming here for so many years, Lemon's biggest realization is that he can't accomplish anything by fighting alone. One less enemy means one more friend. Think about it, if he hadn't done this, Lemon, who had no theater resources and no publicity resources, would not have been able to shoot medium or first-line projects in the early stage. He could only play with low-cost horror films like the early Lionsgate or New Line to accumulate strength. Then he couldn't become famous quickly and attract the attention of major studios. If he hadn't done this, he wouldn't even be able to touch the threshold of the Oscars. So how could he compete and play with the Oscar ecosystem? If it hadn't done so, the first thing Firefly feared when it was based overseas was the squeeze from its original circle. But because the profits from the project cooperation were impressive enough, Warner and Sony both accepted the attitude by default. In other words, when dealing with upstream and downstream forces in the film and television industry, who would take care of him if he was unwilling to share profits and take on risks? How could Firefly develop so fast? Matching its production capabilities has always been its means of gathering resources for mutually beneficial cooperation. Lionsgate is, Sony is, and China Film is. There are no eternal friends, but there are eternal interests. Moreover, in the past few years of cooperation, the senior executives of Lionsgate have shown good abilities and excellent methods. It is a good choice to maintain a relationship with such manufacturers, including Felmer and Guster. They are all people who can accomplish things, but in this time and space, they lack a little luck. While Lemon was thinking secretly, the duty manager's crisp greetings rang out outside the private room, and then he saw Mr. Guster followed President Felmer in with a kind face. To be honest, Lemon still has a good impression of this film company that has established itself in Hollywood by relying on blood, roughness, and tearing up the rules, and has never become a toy in the hands of capital. If the development direction was not overlapped, it would definitely not have come to this point. The two parties were already familiar with each other. After they sat down and ate and drank, Gustav congratulated them first, saying, "Your vision is as good as ever. Avatar has already exceeded 2.6 billion, which is amazing." People in the industry have always been keen on news from the film market. Even though some overseas regions including China have withdrawn the film, the box office performance of Avatar still has room for growth. The IAXM theater has become an important part of the screening process that cannot be ignored, rather than being dispensable. I believe those theater owners are very grateful to you for not letting their efforts go in vain. Lemon couldn't help laughing when he heard this. I have always admired director Cameron. It was he who transferred the shares of Digital Domain to me. Digital Domain was already a mess for him at that time. You took over on your own initiative, and he was also getting rid of a burden. At the side, Filmer deliberately waited for the conversation atmosphere to properly introduce the topic. Looking back, the success of Twilight seems like yesterday, but these days, our two families have become more and more distant. After that, he sighed. This meaningful sigh made Lemon smile slightly, and he personally poured wine for the two of them. How could that be? The development of the Twilight series requires the joint efforts of both of us. That's right. I hope we will have many opportunities to sit together in the future. Gustav didn't want to say much about this matter and finally brought the topic to the point. We think the plan you proposed is feasible for Summit Entertainment, but we also want the copyrights of works such as Step Up and The Hurt Locker. Gustav didn't hide anything. If you agree to this, then the remaining copyrights of the film library and the overseas copy factories will be given priority to your choice. Lionsgate didn't realize the importance of these assets, or rather, it had no intention of doing streaming media. The development value of the copyrights of some bad movies that couldn't even be shown in theaters was almost zero, and no matter how many there were, it was just a nice thing to say. Then how much should we pay? Ryan asked appropriately. 165 million. We will trade it to you after the acquisition. Okay. Chapter 970 April. There is no essential conflict between Lionsgate and Firefly on the goal of Summit Entertainment. Although Lionsgate does not want to let go of the film and television copyright, their understanding of value is different from that of Lemon. Therefore, when the bottom lines of both parties are not much different, and they are sincere to each other, they quickly reached an agreement. 165 million, part of Summit's overseas assets in the UK, France, Germany, and Italy, plus 90% of the film library accumulation can basically meet the needs of Firefly in this transaction. It's just that someone sighed after the exchange. Both parties understand that there is no going back. When Firefly took the initiative to withdraw from the negotiation table, the negotiations between Lionsgate and Summit became smoother. Of course, there are still many things that need to be argued between them, such as the degree of independence of the label, the degree of support from Lionsgate, and even the basic standards of project funds and distribution resources. If Lionsgate wants to introduce foreign aid to reshuffle, it is not so easy to deal with it properly, even if Lionsgate is determined. The post-production work of the tuna continues. In April, when Canada ended the screening of Avatar, this masterpiece entered the operation stage of home entertainment. What is this? Lemon walked into Liam's office and picked up a very beautifully packaged card box on the table, which was printed with the element of Avatar. Liam smiled and replied, Sony's idea. They planned a very complete operation process for the audio and video products of Avatar. This is a sample produced by them. Oh. Lemon was a little curious. After opening the card box, he revealed the Blu-ray DVD inside, a very ordinary disc, and a photo of the crew during the filming. In addition, a pair of 3D glasses for watching movies were also included. What's the use of this? Lemon picked up the glasses. If it is not compatible with the large screen equipment, the viewing effect at home will not be obvious, and it will be uncomfortable to wear. Now that the manufacturer of IAXM projection equipment has expanded its production line, it can meet the purchasing needs of some viewers. You know, some people don't mind spending money to update their home theater screens. Besides, putting glasses in it can also increase the price, giving the audience a sense of psychological satisfaction in purchasing and meeting their expectations. Lemon understood that gifts have always been a good way to cheat money. After all, the price of a set of DVDs is not actually high, but to be crowned as the #1 box office hit in film history, it is definitely not an ordinary price. After taking a closer look, Lemon commented, the packaging is very beautiful, and it looks very tempting to buy. However, what is the process on Sony's side? This set will be released at the end of April, priced at $29 US. There will be an extended version in June, priced at $34 US. In the middle, there will be a Cameron Collection DVD, a high-definition version of Titanic plus Avatar. All types are divided into two prices, deluxe and ordinary, to meet different audience groups. Liam counted them one by one, and Lemon also realized Sony's king-level investment momentum in the audiovisual market. Apart from anything else, this kind of meticulous operation routine must be very profitable, not to mention that movies of the level of Avatar have never lacked fans and audiences to pay for it, which is why Sony dares to play so many tricks. Don't you see that old science fiction movies like Star Trek have good content and good box office, and they are all shining in the offline market? Avatar will have a stronger dominance anyway. However, such a matching marketing method, especially the so-called collection, is too greedy. But think about it, maybe there are many fans willing to pay for it. From the perspective of the market, Avatar is very popular, with high potential demand, and it is easy to bring goods Remember to summarize and send me the data of the first week after the release. After talking about this, Lyman asked about another project. In fact, he came here today because of the formulation and implementation of the publicity and promotion plan for Iron Man 2. What did Warner say? We released the first trailer at the Super Bowl in February of this year, and we will release an updated version next week to keep the heat up and whet the audience's appetite. I have asked a survey company to conduct a survey, and the audience is very enthusiastic about the sequel to Iron Man. Downey's charm has not diminished, but his appeal has been raised. By the way, the theater also asked us to convert the copies to be suitable for screening in the IMAX theater. Do as they ask. Better viewing experience is the only advantage that the theater can attract. Although we did not specifically arrange 3D during the filming process and the conversion effect will not be very good, it is better than the existing one. It's just that we shouldn't have too high expectations for the value that the IMAX theater can create. Yeah. This year's summer season is not as competitive as last year. Those studios haven't put out any big productions. If we choose to release it on May 10th, the screening space reserved will be very good. Lyman said happily. After Lyman looked at several operating reports of the distribution business and just returned to Firefly, Johnson came to him. Judging from his impetuous look, it seems that he has done a good job. Have you settled with Lionsgate? Soon. Summit Entertainment's investors are very straightforward. Their management also has no objection to joining Lionsgate under the conditions of retaining the label and having a certain degree of independent voice. If everything goes well, your deal will take effect by July at the latest. After reporting this information, Johnson took out a few newspapers and magazines from his briefcase and handed them to Lyman. It says here that your return rate on investment in Avatar is as high as 800%, and you can get more than $1 billion in box office alone. This year, you will definitely be among the top 3 in North American film performance share rankings. According to an unnamed executive of Columbia, in the distribution contract for Avatar signed by Columbia and Firefly, they only accounted for 15% of the overseas box office share. Avatar sold $2.7 billion. As the largest investor, Firefly at least got more than $1 billion. In addition, Cameron can also earn about $172 million from this film. This calculation is not rigorous. Lyman curled his lips. Although the box office revenue cannot be concealed, Firefly and Sony's publicity investment, and John Landor and other behind-the-scenes creators' profit sharing, are not mentioned at all. The profit sharing part is all estimated, and even Sony's hidden income is not calculated. If we only talk about the profit sharing ratio, there will be too many mistakes. Apart from other things, Sony's advertising resources can be transferred from one hand to the other, and they still ask Firefly for money. They are also responsible for audiovisual products and copies, and this part of the expenditure can also make a profit, not to mention that Firefly has to share part of the labor and transportation. But our return is not low, Lyman muttered secretly. A blockbuster that broke the record in film history. Firefly does not have to worry about the cash flow in the next few years. Well, this is the case when there is no output. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 971 Bombing. Standing in Times Square in New York, the biggest and most eye-catching poster is the one in Iron Man 2 where Downey is wearing a modified version of the armor. The mature man's face under the mask is revealed, and the word summer season starts. See you there printed next to it are also tempting every passerby. Warner attaches great importance to this movie, and the bombardment of hard and soft advertisements reached its peak at the end of April. The most influential FM radio in the United States. Yes, until 2020, FM radio is still the most listened to medium in the United States. The announcer is seriously discussing the upcoming Iron Man 2 with his companions. Hey, man, I have an insider news. I heard that during the preview of this one, many theater representatives said that the sequel taken over by the new director is very wonderful, and the audiovisual experience is stronger than the first one, and there is no decline in quality at all. They get paid for their work, and there will be no negative feedback in the comments. These days, bombardment like viral marketing has always been the most mainstream tone for blockbuster screenings. I knew there would be no need to worry about changing directors. With Kevin Feige in charge, it will definitely not be too bad. His companion echoed. Besides, the biggest highlight of this movie is still Downey's wonderful performance. Which man doesn't want to wear armor and fight crime? Not to mention that he has Pepper Potts by his side. A beauty matches a hero. Of course, in addition to these, everyone must be looking forward to the Easter eggs in Iron Man 2. Easter eggs are a must for Marvel movies. And the old man's cameo. Yeah, there were no similar shots in the trailer, but there was a character holding two whips and destroying things everywhere. That's Mickey Rourke. I still remember his wonderful performance in Sin City. Having said so much, you can't miss it on the day of the release on May 7th. Listening to the hard work of the sales pitch on the radio, Lyman, who was sitting next to Lyman, analyzed seriously, in the first 2 weeks of May, there are no very competitive movies on the market. Our sequel has traffic and fans, so it should be able to win the weekly championship and increase its exposure and persuasiveness. I just don't know if we can break the results of the first one, and how much room for improvement there is. One knows one's own business. Although Iron Man 2 has a larger investment and a more grand scene, it is a little worse than the first film in terms of storytelling, and it does not have the exciting part of Tony Stark encountering setbacks and ushering in a huge change in the first film. He is really worried that the return rate will not be as good as the previous film. Don't worry, even if the box office data is not so impressive, the sales of copyright peripherals will definitely not be bad. As the popularity of the Marvel brand increases, the increase in revenue from its projects is still quite exaggerated, and that is a big part. That's true. Liam nodded silently. The box office revenue of Marvel's projects has never been the largest proportion. Based on the enthusiasm cultivated by the market, the audience's desire to consume is increasing day by day, which can also be seen from the sales data of derivatives of Thor. Only 2 years later, the sales of Iron Man, which has a better reputation, in the first quarter were not as good as Thor. Of course, the former relies on Downey's screen charm and the bonus of fitting the character's temperament, and the audience's favorability has always been very high. I believe that the peripheral market of the sequel will give them a surprise. In 2 days, Warner will cooperate with several ticketing websites to promote pre-sales. In order to get their promotional position, we need to pay $3 million. Has the publicity cost been almost $40 million? Lemon asked. Well, it's very close to the planned spending space. After saying this, Liam talked about the competition for schedules again. This summer, in addition to Iron Man 2, that our company is going to promote, Inception and Despicable Me in August, there are also Universal's Robin Hood, Columbia's The Karate Kid, and Disney's Toy Story 3. It seems that if we succeed, we will take up half of the summer schedule. There are indeed not many movies with the potential to be a hit in the summer of 2010. The main reason is that Fox and Warner have not yet entered the production rhythm this year. In addition, Alice and How to Train Your Dragon are chosen to be screened in March and April, not in the summer at all, which is also the reason why the scheduling is not fierce enough. But from another perspective, more and more studios are also looking at the months when the audience base is not so large. If there is no competition from similar blockbusters, it is actually a good way to release the potential of movies, and everyone has gradually discovered the benefits of doing so. However, The Karate Kid. Lemon raised his eyebrows when he heard about this work. If there is such a thing as bad luck, Will Smith's career seems to have gone downhill just to make his son famous. Because looking back at the more than 10 years since he became a movie star, this guy's vision for selecting films is very good, and he has repeatedly hit the blockbuster. As a result, when his son gradually grew up and was busy considering his star career, Smith owed favors and used his accumulated connections to pave the way for his son, but basically couldn't find any good projects. Just talking about The Karate Kid, Uncle Long gave up his usual humorous fighting style and was willing to play a reclusive martial arts master as a supporting role. There were no scenes of showing off in the whole scene, which was also difficult for him. And this film is also a collaboration with China Film, but it is not a joint production, but a simple domestic shooting, and China Film cooperated. But thinking about it this way, the chances of Firefly reaching the top are a little higher. The former overlords Warner and Fox, one suddenly can't make movies anymore, and can only rely on the old capital, and the other is affected by the parent company, and has no intention of producing. Columbia, without Spider-Man, has no capital to compete. Disney Animation is very strong, but Despicable Me is not a vegetarian. Universal has always been very stable, and is the third and fourth place. The remaining Paramount has become the biggest opponent of Firefly's top this year. The world is really wonderful. Just thinking about throwing a big bomb into the film market around the world. Assistant Mace handed over the phone. Miss Eva. Baby, what's up? He was in a good mood and said jokingly, I want to tell you in advance that I won't go to the premiere of Iron Man 2. I'm shooting Breaking Dawn and the workload is very heavy. Well, I didn't plan to attend originally. Just let Kevin lead the team. How are you doing? Lemon asked with concern. Twilight depends on the age of the main creators. While they are still under 20 years old, 3 or 4 films are shot together to retain the beauty of youth. It's not bad. I can learn a lot here. It's quite fulfilling. She smiled. Well, don't tire yourself. If there is anything, you can let Garsha take care of it. The two chatted for a long time on the phone, but the screening arrangements outside were proceeding in an orderly manner. Chapter 972 Market Situation. This year's summer season, the push of each studio is more stable and quiet than in previous years, and the momentum is not so tense. Basically, each studio's major works can be screened for 2 to 3 weeks. In comparison, the schedule of less than 10 days last year was simply a devil's arrangement. Now it is much more relaxed, and it feels very tacit. Or it can't be said to be tacit. If everyone wants to get the results they deserve, a head-on confrontation is definitely not the best way. It's just that doing so is not so comfortable for the audience, and there are fewer choices. But among the existing choices, Marvel's projects with their own traffic are actually not lacking in attention. After enduring more than half a month of concentrated bombardment, when the film was officially released, the eager fans quickly detonated the North American film market, which also symbolized the arrival of the main schedule of the market this summer. Then, things got out of control. A survey agency near Fifth Avenue in New York has always provided data to major newspapers and magazines for box office reference because of its professional data coordination capabilities and some connections. The more popular the schedule, the more business it can receive. Miller's is one of them. That day, he picked up a stack of questionnaires as usual and went to a nearby cinema. Seeing that the audience had not yet left, he habitually went to the ticket seller to chat, listen to first-hand information or directly ask him about his views on various works in the schedule. Although the threshold for ticket sellers is low and the salary is not high, in Miller's opinion, in some ways, they are the people with the most intuitive feelings. At least they have a direct understanding of the group portrait of the film audience, such as the age group of the main ticket buyers or the desire to watch movies, which are very basic, but very real feedback information. And because he often contacts the theater chain, everyone is relatively familiar with him. So even if the ticket seller who had just been busy for a while and was sitting on a chair to rest saw him, he was not very cold. Where is your manager? Miller's looked around and didn't see another person he needed to deal with frequently, so he asked casually. But after hearing his inquiry, the grassroots employees of the theater chain had a strange tone, as if they were a little disappointed, and said, the screening schedule needs to be changed. We are reporting the situation to the higher-ups, and they want to increase the number of screenings of the sequel to Iron Man, and reduce the screenings of other films. Miller's nodded and asked with interest, is it that those movies can't sell tickets? Or what? Don't say it. A Nightmare on Elm Street is too popular. We thought it could at least last for 2 weeks, but it turned out that even the old audiences who like to watch blood-stained horror movies the most couldn't stand it. Didn't we arrange a show for it in the morning? Guess what the attendance was? It's less than 20%, and this is only the second weekend. It feels like it's about to be taken off the screen. I just saw the manager complaining that it's not easy to meet today's performance targets. Well, it seems that the In Nightmare on Elm Street series will rot in the hands of Warner. After the merger with New Line, it still doesn't work well. The two were chatting when a voice came from the theater. Miller looked at his watch and knew that it was almost time for the show to end, so he quickly got up and said, "Let's talk later. I'm going to work first." After that, he walked out of the theater and stood in a prominent position. He watched the audience leaving the theater of Iron Man 2 talking and laughing. He couldn't help but know what was going on. Especially many young people had a certain agitation and excitement in their faces, and they were satisfied at a glance. It seems that the market for the sequel is still very secure. Miller's thought secretly, but soon walked up and distributed questionnaires. Because there were small gifts for the questionnaire survey, many audiences were eager to show off, or had some kind of complaining mentality, so today was just as smooth. However, in order to expand the base of the sample survey, Miller still left a large part of the questionnaire unsent. As the number of people sampled increased, the overall audience feedback became more and more detailed. Among them, a pair of partners who watched the movie together almost represented the mainstream evaluation of the movie. It didn't meet my expectations, but it wasn't bad either. I can only say that it lacks some flavor compared to the first film. After watching it, it didn't give me a bright feeling. Just like in the first film, the scene where Downey took the initiative to admit it was very exciting, but there was no such interesting plot in the second film. It's just average. The new director is still capable, and his camera technique is very mature. An objective fan commented, "If I give it a score, I'd give it a B. You're too picky." I think the second film is very good. Especially the little Easter eggs of Hydra, which continue the design of Captain America. Especially the slogan "Cut off a head and two more will grow" shouted by Whiplash. It feels so good. Marvel designed this very well. There are also little humors everywhere. Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow is also very interesting. The scene where she competes with Pepper Potts in body shape made me and the people around me laugh. But don't you think there are too many ads? The product placement is too obvious. For example, why does the new Audi R8 sports car driven by Downey have countless close-ups in the film? Also, did the film spend all its money on the racing track and the World Expo at the end? On the contrary, the climax is a bit too short and the main and secondary scenes are not clear. Of course, Scarlett is beautiful, but I still think the plot arrangement does not connect well with the feeling created by the first film. That is much more sincere than many movies. The new version of the armor has a gorgeous and cool feeling like a top-notch sports car in terms of lines and patterns. The other armor war machine controlled by Colonel Howard has a heavy metal feeling. They have all made very different improvements, and the soundtrack is as suitable as always. The friend argued with reason, with a sense of not allowing any belittlement. Forget it, it is definitely worth watching. At least the movie ticket money is not wasted. Another person was helpless, but also felt that Iron Man 2 just didn't have a good story, but it was not perfunctory or ugly. After a pause, he added, "But I still hope that, if there is a third film, it will be directed by Lyman himself." Anyone could hear the admiration for Lyman in his words. But it's not surprising. A part of the audience of Iron Man is already fans of Lyman. A person next to him nodded repeatedly. It's definitely more points for Lyman to direct. But overall, the atmosphere of watching the movie is very comfortable. I still want to grab a ticket to the IAMX theater and go see it again. See how strong the shock of the armor is through the screen. After the two people finished their comments and answered the questions, Miller put away the questionnaire thoughtfully, went back to the theater again, took a look at the attendance rate of several screenings today, and immediately went back to submit his work results for the people above to count. Chapter 973, Compare the goods and throw them away. Before I knew it, it was already late. The quiet atmosphere on the street was set off by the soft light of the street lamps. The night sky was quiet, but for some people, there was no enjoyment of falling asleep. Beverly Hills, the mansion purchased by the CEO of Warner. In the study, Kevin Tsujihara sat in the main seat, frowning and drinking a cup of coffee. In front of him, the deputy of the distribution department sat on a soft chair beside him, with an unclear expression. In silence, Kevin Tsujihara, who had digested the results, put down his coffee cup and said helplessly, "I didn't expect that the plot design of the sequel to Iron Man was not as good as the first one, and the audience feedback was not as good as the former, but it still achieved better results than the first one. I think Marvel's project stickiness is better than we thought." The vice president nodded and said, "Yes, no one expected that the audience's expectations would not be affected by the decline in quality. It seems that they have succeeded again. According to our People's Report, the sales data of Iron Man and the derivative products is very impressive. Now Hasbro and Marvel's own toy factories are all specialized in the production to the greatest extent, and their production energy is biased towards the production of Iron Man. In addition, because of the popularity brought by the emergence of the sequel, it also fed back to other profit models of the copyright, and even a lot of Blu-ray high-definition discs of the first part were sold. It seems that many new audiences have been attracted to join. Just 1 hour ago, yesterday's North American film market box office was released. Among them, the special effects blockbuster Iron Man 2 that opened the summer blockbuster directly got a luxurious start with a box office of $52.3 million on the first day. You know, the first day of the series that made a good reputation was only $35.1 million. A little calculation will show that the sequel's first day opening rose by half. In other words, this result can almost ensure that the first week box office will surpass the previous work and create a new record for the series. For Warner, the mood is also complicated. The happy thing is that the second part will be more popular than the first one and the distribution profit will be higher. What is not so wonderful is that Marvel's continued success will definitely make the audience spontaneously compare DC projects and will also squeeze DC's popularity and even wealth in the superhero market. Kevin Tsujihara sighed slightly, his tone filled with emotion and approval. With the sequel continuing to lay the foundation for success, the development value of this character will probably increase a lot. By the way, have you heard about the new sequel plan? Yes. Kevin admitted during the interview with reporters at the premiere that the production of the third film was within their company's plan and that the main creators would not be replaced. His original words were, "No one can replace Downey's charm. It has stabilized the fans' hearts. Their method of cultivating audience stickiness is really effective." Originally, the plot and quality of the second film were not as good as the first, but just because Downey continued to play Iron Man, the audience was still willing to go to the theater to support it. I heard that in the audience questionnaire feedback, Downey's satisfaction was close to 100%. Yes, it's exaggerated. In my opinion, the audience's sense of substitution for Downey's performance is extremely strong, and the labeling of the impression is the most important reason why the second film's box office is so outstanding. The audience's acceptance and image overlap may be higher than that of Bale's Bruce Wayne. The vice president gave a simple example to illustrate Downey's role in Iron Man. In fact, it is not uncommon for roles to be tied to actors in the film industry. We can only praise the casting for being good and having a relatively unified aura, so the performance is twice as effective with half the effort, and the effect is very good, which is a plus. How should I put it? When a project is established, people like us definitely hope that the progress of the project will follow the prescribed route and try not to deviate, but sometimes we have to admit that luck is a thing. Marvel's actions for Iron Man have actually exceeded our expectations one after another. At the beginning, many of us were not optimistic about choosing a tainted artist as the protagonist, and the risk was very high, but we did not expect that the two would spark so much that now it can be said that Downey made Iron Man. The vice president shook his head slightly, speechless. Iron Man 2 had a media comprehensive review of only 57 points. Yahoo rated it B and the Rotten Tomatoes website had a freshness rating of 75%. 155 votes in favor. 53 votes against. It can be said that the ratings in all aspects were one level lower than the previous work, but the results rose a level instead, which really surprised him. After all, there are too many negative feedbacks, including on the internet. Don Cheadle is far inferior to Torrance Howard and has no chemistry with Robert Downey Jr. Gwyneth Paltrow and Scarlett Johansson will compete for camera positions without hesitation whenever they are on the same screen, which has affected the relationships between the characters in the play. It always feels awkward when they touch each other, and the completion of the script is a reason for the downgrade of this work. The pleasure of the previous work's high level and smooth development has been stumbled between the swings of too many characters in this episode. Fortunately, Downey's temperament is as outstanding as ever. In order to explore the truth, Warner easily analyzed the huge role that Downey played in attracting traffic after obtaining the data summarized in the questionnaire. You can even say that the box office of $52.3 million on the first day was due to the unremitting support of Iron Man's fanatical fans. Otherwise it would never be so high. It was once close to the box office market on the first day of the finale of the Spider-Man trilogy in 2007, and continued the value of Iron Man's higher return rate. After listening to his subordinates, Kevin Tsujihara was inexplicably angry. Why can't the development of our Green Lantern Corps be like Iron Man? Are we entangled in restoring the comics, or lowering the threshold for viewing and pleasing the market? Why can't it be integrated well? The Warner boss was venting his dissatisfaction with the production department in front of his trusted subordinates, especially seeing that Iron Man 2 is so successful. The development of the project that the company has high hopes for has been repeatedly blocked. The director, the DC department and even the production department of Warner now have different concepts, and they don't know how to solve it appropriately. The failure of Watchmen made Warner understand that if they only respect the original work, the audience cannot be expanded, but if they do not follow the original work, they can't keep the basic base of fans, and dare not talk about how the market can be, let alone stimulate the consumption desire of fans. In other words, for the development of the extremely popular IP of Green Lantern Corps, Warner is in a dilemma. Not long ago, Martin Campbell, the director of Green Lantern, had a quarrel with their production team, which is also a headache. The vice president of distribution saw the boss lose his temper, and of course he did not express his opinions casually. So after complaining for a while, Kevin Tsujihara controlled his emotions and calmed down. Although he felt a little bad, because generally speaking, projects that have problems in the middle of filming are either a big hit at the box office or a serious failure. He didn't know how far Green Lantern would go, but he just silently hoped that it would develop in a good direction. However, the movie that was originally scheduled to be screened in the summer of 2010 had to be postponed. Chapter 974. 80% on the first day. Warner's Green Lantern project and the Green Lantern Corps series are typical examples of a film that thought it was easier to please the audience with a popular IP, but ended up being cold in the market. Lyman didn't know Kevin Tsujihara's troubles. If he knew, he would definitely laugh out loud. This time, it was because the director and the production team kept making choices that the project deviated seriously from the plan. On the one hand, they have suffered losses, and dare not mention the background foreshadowing too much to prevent non-DC comic fans from not understanding and distinguishing the cause and effect relationship between the characters. On the other hand, they have tasted the huge profits brought by the reboot of Batman, and want to give full play to the unique flavor of the setting system of Green Lantern. So they don't want to be too routine, and they are also ambitious to take the route of adaptation that wants both word of mouth and box office. However, it is not so easy to do both and be strong in both hands, especially after seeing the success of Fox's X-Men, as well as the derivative independent Project Wolverine, Sony's Spider-Man, and Marvel's Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and Hulk. They have also figured out the taste and feel that a little routine, even if it is not easy, to gain an absolute advantage in word of mouth, but splicing overwhelming crazy push can also achieve good results. So they soon lost their way in the balance between making money and taking risks. Green Lantern started shooting for 6 months, and the preparation time was even longer, but it made director Martin extremely irritated, because he was always notified to change the shooting plan and add or delete the script that should have been decided early. From this aspect, we can also find that, if a new project cannot unify ideas, it is easy to make everyone confused. Especially the film industry is very taboo about disharmony in the production team. This is why Kevin criticized Edward Norton, but did not hate the decision-making mistakes, that the setting of the prince in Thor's first stage play was too strong and the audience did not like it so much. Because the former is that the actor wants to change the script, and the latter is filmed according to the script, but the effect is not satisfactory, and the two represent different things. In this way, perhaps it can be understood why people in the industry are not optimistic when they see that a certain project is postponed or withdrawn, because this itself means that the plan of that studio has a serious deviation. Of course, Warner's production department is not weak. The so-called worry is worry, but before the result comes out, who can say for sure? Moreover, Iron Man 2 is in theaters. As a distributor, Warner's employees are quite happy when they have money to earn. They are always paying attention to the market trend and constantly adjusting the topic of publicity. In this way, after the first day of sales, in order to match the momentum of the box office, and being on the list is a good means of attracting traffic, in addition to following up the needs of the theaters in real time, and increasing the screening share. Warner and Blue Butterfly Pictures discussed to increase the hype of the actors in the play, but did not dare to boast about the quality of the movie and the market evaluation. In other words, if you can't play the word of mouth card, then play the public opinion card. After discussion, the two companies chose the following promotion methods. One is to increase Downey's exposure, and the other is to hype Scarlett and Gwyneth, the new and old Hollywood actresses, based on the news that the actors in the play are not in harmony. Expand their confrontation, let the audience taste the fun of peeping into the contradictions of the actresses, and attract them to the theater. Therefore, in the next period of time, the audience can see Downey on more programs, interviews, and magazine covers. The two actresses also set up a stage in the air at the instruction of Warner and Blue Butterfly, and occasionally choke each other. Of course, the two of them actually had a competitive spirit, and the effect of the verbal battle was unexpectedly good. After all, the so-called discord is not groundless. The two basically did not interact with each other during filming except for the needs of filming. Because for Gwyneth, Scarlett, a younger, prettier, and better looking actress, is in the same play with her, which is bound to squeeze the space she should have enjoyed. The audience has always been comparing, especially the competition between actors in the same frame and the same acting style. This effect will be magnified, and suddenly become a stepping stone for others. As for Scarlett, does she really want an Oscar-winning actress to steal her limelight? No matter how mediocre she is, she has won the award. So it is natural that the two do not get along, and there is soil. Such hype is also fueling the flames, and creating more topics. As the saying goes, how can you make money if you don't attract attention? In this era, where traffic can be monetized, let alone actively arousing a sense of camp among the fans of actors, there can only be traffic, and it doesn't matter if you consume the deceased. For example, in Fast and Furious 7, Paul died because he loved racing, and he died because of speeding. The crew was unlucky to pay for him, but after being consumed, he quickly broke the circle, like a clown who was created as a god. Many times, the use of public emotions for hype has a great impact that often exceeds people's imagination. Of course, this face-to-face melon-eating routine is definitely not as good as public opinion that directly arouses social sympathy, but fans care about it. Scarlett still has a lot of fans, and passers-by are quite willing to pay for her charm. In order to show support for your own people, would it be embarrassing not to contribute to the box office? Not to mention, since the 3D plus IMAX theater screening mode has become popular, Alice has also taken more than $100 million in the IMAX theater. It is conceivable that this experience is tempting to the audience. After watching the ordinary theater, some viewers will also wait to buy a ticket for the IMAX theater to enjoy the strong visual sense of the armor diving from the sky. The ticket price of the IMAX theater is almost half more expensive than that of the general theater. The income of 2 full theaters is equivalent to 3 full theaters before, and the attendance rate has been very stable. The value of such an increase can be imagined. Anyway, since Avatar, the global film market has accelerated the replacement of IMAX giant screen equipment. After all, if you are the owner of a chain of theaters, it is easy to make a decision to ignore the initial investment, as long as you see the output results of the IMAX giant screen theater. It is a veritable competition point for watching movies, and also represents the trend of watching movies by the audience. Under the influence of the market effect, the more prominent the box office of a movie is during the schedule, the easier it is to attract the public's attention and influence their choices. After all, people are social creatures, and it is easy to follow the crowd. Therefore, even before Iron Man 2 has recovered its investment and generated revenue for Marvel, it has already made a great contribution to the revenue of upstream and downstream channels, such as theaters, advertisers, and even radio stations. The North American movie weekend market rose to 63 million in a single day after its premiere, and Iron Man 2 accounted for 80% of the total. Chapter 975, The Growing Market. May 10th, Lyman held a routine meeting. After clarifying the subsequent promotion plan, he did not go back to work, but came to the floor of Marvel Entertainment Department. Walking out of the elevator, employees kept saluting along the way. Feeling the enthusiasm of the employees in the entire office area, Lyman could not help but nod repeatedly to express his satisfaction. How much money can you make just by making movies? In any industry, multi-channel and multi-business means of supporting development, making the most of your own chips, and improving the utilization rate of resources are the kingly way to prosperity. Lyman sighed in his heart. It seems that the small goal of 100 million is really just a small goal. When you have capital, and are on the right path, the snowball effect is really amazing. On the side, David Mazur accompanied him to inspect for a while. Seeing the boss talking about the peripheral market of Iron Man 2, he also reported the sales situation in detail. Boss, in the 3 days since the release, the market feedback from the comics, toy figures and brand derivatives has been better than that of the first film, and the hype of the project has increased in various ways. Among them, 94,500 low-end figures were sold, a year-on-year increase of nearly 2.7 times. 147,000 medium-priced, 179 figures were sold, a year-on-year increase of 3.24 times. 26,300 high-priced and even special models were sold, an increase of nearly 80%. In addition, because of Downey's relationship, his Image licensed products are also selling well, including keychains and other small items that can sell more than 40,000 pieces, not to mention that the new Iron Man book also received a traffic dividend. So, putting aside various expenses, labor, and the share of the cooperation manufacturers, in the first 3 days of the first week, Iron Man 2 created a total profit of $124 million. After hearing David's report, Lyman didn't feel anything. He just felt that Iron Man was spreading more and more. It was much easier to achieve added value than to cultivate the market again. However, when the executives of Marvel Entertainment learned about the actual results, they were all a little surprised. They couldn't imagine how high this business could reach in the future. After all, although this was a peripheral sales contributed by fans, the future data may not be as good as the first week, but in addition to paying attention to character economy, the timeliness of hype development is generally between 2 and 3 months. It is foreseeable that the total revenue will break the first data. Not to mention, Iron Man 2 also performed very well in the global film market. During the weekend period from May 7th to May 9th, after earning $52.3 million on the first day in North America, it earned $45.6 million on Saturday and $41.1 million on Sunday, respectively. The overall box office trend drew a sales curve of Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Although it became a typical fast-moving consumer product and was not as strong as the first film, it could not withstand the high starting point and easily topped the weekly chart with $139 million in the first weekend. This also marks that Iron Man 2 has become the second best first weekend performance of comic-adapted superhero films over the years, second only to Spider-Man 3's first week record of $148 million. The scale of 4,380 theaters also allowed Iron Man 2 to achieve a high box office conversion of $31,700 per theater on the weekend. In other words, at the same level, the first week attendance conversion rate of Iron Man 2 is 7 percentage points higher than that of the first film, which shows that the audience's support for the series and the audience distribution are steadily expanding. This is undoubtedly the most important feedback, which can make the upstream and downstream channel dealers who benefit from the project more confident in increasing the corresponding resources. Similarly, because of the performance of Iron Man 2, the data of the entire North American market instantly reached 174 million, an increase of 60% compared with last week's data, which also made industry insiders see clearly why the summer season is a must-fight period for studios, and vividly outlined a watershed between spring and summer. However, due to the strong appeal of Iron Man 2, the runner-up A Nightmare on Elm Street fell by 74% this week, earning a pitiful $9.17 million, and the cumulative North American revenue is less than $48.5 million, which is really lower than the average output level of the series. In addition, How to Train Your Dragon, which has a good reputation, ranks third. This movie makes Paramount's senior management very satisfied. Not only is the trend stable, it has opened a beautiful long-term operation cycle, and it has harvested an animation gold mine that needs to be further developed. Of course, the producer of this project, DreamWorks Animation, is the biggest contributor. Although the two parties are still in the honeymoon period of cooperation, there have been some signs of discord, especially after Universal did not establish the animation brand of Illumination Entertainment like in the previous life. The demand for animation business has always been there, and it has also set its sights on DreamWorks Animation, which has produced many hits, and has been constantly trying to win it over. After all, DreamWorks Animation is an independent animation company, and the relationship between it and Paramount is maintained by a contract. Universal certainly has the chips to impress them, schedule resources, profit sharing model, and are everyone competing fairly. In the office, after reporting the first week's sales data, David began to analyze and summarize the market. He continued, judging from the current growth rate, our derivatives market is very impressive. Well, our own toy factory is divided into shifts to rush production, but it can't keep up with the pace. Many orders have been diverted to other people. I think we can add a few production lines to expand the proportion of manufacturing business. You decide for yourself. Our main focus is still on special models. The 1-to-1 wearable armor models are our biggest source of profit. David nodded repeatedly and explained, we can fully handle this part of the orders, because those customers often customize according to their own needs, and the production cycle is much more relaxed than the development of other businesses. Moreover, most users cannot afford the customized models that cost hundreds of thousands or even millions. Although the profit is high, the largest sales volume is still the ordinary models. Although we will stock up for this, we have never dared to have too much. When the delivery speed is fast, the problem of supply and demand will definitely become more and more obvious with the steady development of our characters. Increasing the proportion in this aspect is also to prevent the core market from being completely controlled by Hasbro and other manufacturers in the future. Therefore, the proportion of our own supply is the focus of investment in the next few years. Lemon waved his hand. It's okay to have a plan. I just remind you not to rush. After a pause, Lemon asked another question. I asked you to contact those brands that are interested in cooperation. How is it going? I have notified them all. I heard that they are for brand implantation in Marvel's new project. They are more easy to talk to than each other. Among them, the person in charge of Audi also wants to talk to you alone. Lemon smiled faintly. That's good. Please make an appointment with them tomorrow for me. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.